Chapter 2202. Bailey Hongzhuang had always been a steady cultivator. Even though elixirs were very effective in raising one's strength, Bailey Hongzhuang did not consume much of them. Based on her current situation, there was still a large gap between her and Lan Qingyan's strength. Therefore, she wanted to raise her strength by 1 point. With her current foundation, it was not a problem for her to raise her strength from the 6th level of the Green Realm to the 7th level of the Green Realm by consuming elixirs. Therefore, Bailey Hongzhuang went into seclusion the moment she entered the house. She wanted to use this night to break through to the 7th level of the Green Realm. In order to be able to appear in front of the Lan family, in order to be able to compete with Lan Qingyan, she had waited for a long time. Now that the opportunity had finally arrived, she naturally wouldn't miss it. While Bailey Hongzhuang was in seclusion to break through to the 6th level of the Green Realm, Di Beichen was listening to the elders and the palace master's report. Young lord, the martial arts championship will begin in half a year. We have to prepare in advance and select some outstanding disciples to participate with you. The Azure Dragon Palace Master, Yin Kaicheng, had a serious and dignified expression. The martial arts championship was a grand occasion in the entire Shangxian continent. As long as one could achieve good results in the martial arts championship, one would be truly famous. Tiangang sect's strength had never been weak. They could not perform badly in the martial arts championship. Di Beichen nodded slightly. Same old rules. The Four Palaces competition will be held in 3 months to select outstanding disciples. The next 3 months will be a unified experience to raise one's strength. All the palace masters and elders can begin to inform the disciples of this news, so that they can prepare early. Although Di Beichen knew a lot about the martial arts championship, he had never participated in it. If his leg had not been injured previously, he would have competed in the previous martial arts championship. However, Tiangang sect was represented by someone else at that time. This time, as the young lord of Tiangang sect, he would personally lead the disciples to compete. He must achieve good results. Hearing Di Beichen's arrangement, the palace masters and elders all nodded. It seemed that Di Beichen had already thought of a way to deal with this matter without their reminder. Looks like the battle of the Four Palaces this time is going to be exceptionally exciting. Qin Ai's face was brimming with smiles. Usually, there were still many disciples who liked to preserve their strength during the competition of the 4 halls, and did not display their full strength. However, the battle of the Four Palaces this time was related to the martial arts championship. He believed that no matter which disciple it was, they would not give up such an opportunity to become famous. All the disciples would definitely use their trump cards. The hall masters and elders all smiled and nodded after hearing this. Their Tiangang sect had many disciples and countless genius disciples. Once the fighting spirit of these disciples was aroused, it would absolutely be a fierce battle between dragons and tigers. Now they could start looking forward to it. Di Beichen's eyes darkened. Just as Qin Ai had said, the competition between the 4 palaces this time would be unprecedentedly difficult. Bailey Hongzhuang came to Tiangang sect for only a short time, and during this period of time, she put her energy in other aspects. If she wanted to stand out in the battle of the 4 palaces, it would definitely not be an easy task. However, Di Beichen was still full of confidence in Bailey Hongzhuang. Chapter 2203. When the news of the Battle of the Four Palaces and the martial arts tournament spread in Tiangang sect, all the disciples were full of excitement and shock. Some disciples who did not know about the martial arts tournament even asked about it. After knowing the importance of the martial arts tournament, all the disciples could not help but be full of expectations. Such a good opportunity, every disciple had a chance. Of course, the premise was that their own strength was strong enough. Some disciples who did not cultivate with all their strength only felt regret after knowing about this. If they knew that the martial arts tournament was about to begin, they would have cultivated with all their strength. If they watched this opportunity slip away in front of their eyes, it was really unbearable. Similarly, some disciples who were extremely diligent on weekdays only felt that they had waited for so long and finally waited for a good opportunity. They had long been eager and could not hold back. Bailey Hongzhuang, who was cultivating in the house, did not know that the news had exploded in Tiangang sect. Until the next day when the sky gradually brightened, Bailey Hongzhuang opened her eyes. As she thought, with the effect of the elixir, she successfully broke through to the 7th level of the Green Realm. Moreover, after breaking through to the 7th level of the Green Realm, she found that there was still a part of the elixir in her body. As she cultivated, this part of the elixir would be completely absorbed by her, and her cultivation would be improved again. During this time, although Bailey Hongzhuang had put all her energy on her parents and grandmother, her cultivation still had a certain progress. Therefore, she was not far from breaking through to the 7th level of the Green Realm. With the elixir, it was even faster. When Xia Jiqing and Bai Junyu were preparing to go to the meditation field in the morning, they unexpectedly saw Bailey Hongzhuang coming out of the house. Their faces suddenly showed a strong surprise. "Hongzhuang, when did you come back?" Xia Jiqing looked at Bailey Hongzhuang in surprise. Since the end of the alchemist competition, they had not seen Hongzhuang and did not know when Hongzhuang came back. "I just came back yesterday." Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. "Hongzhuang, have you heard? The Battle of the Four Palaces this time concerns the martial arts championship." Xia Jiqing quickly walked to the side of Bailey Hongzhuang. The news had only come out yesterday, and everyone was very concerned about it. There were many outstanding disciples in Tianggang sect, not to mention that the strength of those senior disciples was far stronger than them. In comparison, this batch of new disciples basically had no hope. However, Bailey Hongzhuang's strength was not something an ordinary new disciple could compare to. As long as Bailey Hongzhuang worked hard, she might have a chance to participate. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and said, "I've already heard. This time, whether it's the Battle of the Four Palaces or the Martial Arts Championship, it's a great opportunity for us. All of you must do your best." Even if he could not participate in the Martial Arts Championship, as long as he could perform well in the Battle of the Four Palaces and gain the attention of the Palace Master, it would be good enough. "We will, Hongzhuang, you have to work harder." Xia Jiqing smiled. "I will." Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were sharp. This time, she would definitely get a place in the martial arts championship. Chapter 2204. "Hongzhuang, are you going to meditate now? Then let's go together." Bai Junyu said with a smile. Today's Bailey Hongzhuang was much busier than before. They could only choose not to ask, as long as Bailey Hongzhuang had a good life. "You go first, I'm going to find Di Beichen," Bailey Hongzhuang said with a smile. Although the concentration of power in the meditation room was much richer than in other places, Di Beichen's cultivation room was even richer. For her now, there was nothing more important than improving her strength, so she didn't have any time to waste. Listening to Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Xia Jiqing and Bai Junyu also understood, and immediately smiled and nodded. They all understood that Bailey Hongzhuang would never miss such an opportunity, and presumably now she would seize every second. When Bailey Hongzhuang came to Di Beichen's palace, she found that there was no Di Beichen in the palace, and then went directly into the cultivation room. Sure enough, Bailey Hongzhuang saw Di Beichen in the cultivation room. "Wife, you are here." Seeing Bailey Hongzhuang coming, Di Beichen's face quickly filled with a happy smile. Looking carefully, Di Beichen suddenly found that Bailey Hongzhuang's aura had changed, and the smile in his eyes suddenly deepened. In one night, wife has broken through to the 7th level of the Green Realm. Yesterday, Bailey Hongzhuang told him that she was going back to retreat, and he didn't think much about it. He didn't expect that in just one night, Bailey Hongzhuang had successfully broken through. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled slightly. "There are many excellent disciples in the 4 temples. If I want to get a place, don't I have to work hard?" Originally, Bailey Hongzhuang didn't know enough about the strength of these disciples, but after knowing the strength of Di Beichen and Xiren, she knew how big the gap between them was. The strength of the disciples of Tianggang sect couldn't be compared with Di Beichen, but some of the powerful cultivators wouldn't be much worse. In contrast, the pressure on her was really not small. She didn't know how strong Lan Qingyan was now, but if she guessed correctly, Lan Qingyan's cultivation was definitely not worse than Di Beichen and Xiren. Because Lan Qingyan was a talented cultivator with the colorful pearl. The colorful pearl could help a cultivator save a lot of time during cultivation. Ever since she had the colorful pearl, Bailey Hongzhuang already deeply understood how big the gap was. Lan Qingyan already had it since she was young. After so many years, she saved a lot of time compared to others. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Di Beichun chuckled. Wife, your strength is also very strong. Let's seize the time to cultivate. Let's go to the desert world first. Bailey Hongzhuang had already thought of a cultivation method. They would cultivate in the desert world for 3 days, then meditate in the cultivation room to recover. In this way, not only would their battle strength be improved, the effect of cultivation after their spirit power was exhausted would also be better. Di Beichun nodded slightly. He was also very interested in the desert world, especially those strange demonic beasts that he had never seen before. They always had different characteristics when fighting. The 3 beasts immediately came up. We also have to work hard. As contracted beasts, they were part of their master's strength. No matter if it was a competition or other times, they were allowed to appear. Chapter 2205. Although Lan Qingyan started cultivating much earlier than Master, it was impossible for Lan Qingyan to have 3 contracted beasts like Master. At least in this aspect, they had better conditions than Lan Qingyan. Therefore, they must display their strength and help Master completely defeat Lan Qingyan. In the following period of time, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichun entered the desert world to cultivate at night, and meditated in the cultivation room to absorb elemental energy during the day. Regarding such high-intensity cultivation, whether it was Di Beichun, Bailey Hongzhuang, or even the 3 beasts, none of them had any objections. Normally, they might be able to relax a little, but at such a critical moment, no one had the slightest thought of relaxing. At the same time, the benefits of such high-intensity cultivation were also extremely shocking. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others encountered more and more powerful demonic beasts in the desert world. Their battle methods also became more and more varied. Every battle was thrilling. Because there was a big gap in strength between Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichun. Di Beichun often dealt with the most difficult ones while Bailey Hongzhuang dealt with the slightly weaker ones. The 3 beasts also went all out in this desert world. Xiao He and Xiao Bai's figures changed size at will, and they became more and more proficient in using the yin-yang 8 trigrams formation. Previously, Xiao He and Xiao Bai also spent a lot of effort to cultivate the yin-yang 8 trigrams formation, but they didn't have much opportunity to test it on normal days. Ever since they had this desert world, they didn't have to worry about not having a place to test it. What they were most worried about was exhausting the elemental energy in their body, and the demonic beasts attacking again. That was the worst. Di Beichun also felt the benefits of this desert world. The demonic beasts here were endless, and the deeper they went, the stronger they were. He didn't have any suitable opponents when cultivating in Tiangang sect. In the past, Master would occasionally spar with him, but now there was no chance. If he didn't have this desert world, he could only leave Tiangang sect to find a place to cultivate. However, with this desert world, it was undoubtedly much more convenient. In the process of fighting in the desert world, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others also found that these blood demon crystals were not harmful to Baisher. On the contrary, they could promote the growth of Baisher's cultivation base. The effects seemed to be stronger than the usual demon crystals. Usually, Bailey Hongzhuang had to spend a lot of effort just to prepare enough rations for Baisher. Now that they were here, Baisher's rations were completely solved, which was undoubtedly a good thing. In the process of consuming the blood demon crystal, Baisher's strength continued to rise. Not only Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichun, but all the disciples of Tiangang Zong were working hard to cultivate, in order to amaze the world in 3 months and be famous in 6 months. As the young sect master of Tiangang sect, Di Beichun was even more willing to part with these cultivation resources. The martial arts championship was a competition that every force attached great importance to. If they fell in the rankings in this martial arts championship, the reputation of the sect would be damaged. As the representative of Tiangang sect, Di Beichun had to perform well in this martial arts championship. Therefore, when Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichun retreated from the desert world, they used the cultivation resources while cultivating in the cultivation room. As a result, the speed at which his strength was increasing had increased by a few notches. Chapter 2206. Bailey Hongzhuang felt that time had passed extremely quickly as she cultivated like an ascetic monk. In the blink of an eye, 3 months had passed. To other cultivators it might have been 3 months, but to Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichun, it was close to a year's time. For an entire year, if they weren't fighting in the desert world, they were cultivating in the cultivation room. Wife, the competition of the 4 palaces will begin tomorrow. It's time for us to come out of seclusion. Di Beichun turned to look at Bailey Hongzhuang beside him. They had been in seclusion for so long. If they still didn't come out, the palace masters and elders would be worried. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. It's time for me to return to the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. Bailey Hongzhuang still didn't know what the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall had planned for the competition of the 4 palaces. If she didn't go and find out today, she might not even know how the competition was going to be tomorrow. I also need to find the palace masters and elders to discuss this in the conference hall. Di Beichun smiled. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichun looked at each other, then walked out of the cultivation room together. Xiao He and Xiao Bai leaped onto Bailey Hongzhuang's shoulders, while Baishir followed beside Bailey Hongzhuang. In this year's time, Baishir's figure had become even more muscular than before. Walking beside Bailey Hongzhuang, he was like a majestic lion, very eye-catching. Once they left the bedroom, Bailey Hongzhuang quickly rushed to the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. Speaking of which, she could be considered as the least involved disciple in the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. Ever since she had become a disciple of the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall, she rarely stayed in the Palace Hall and didn't know anything about the Palace Hall. As a disciple of the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall, she didn't even receive the cultivation resources that she was supposed to receive every month. After she had verified her strength at the ranking pillar, she had never gone back for another verification. Perhaps, the current her had already become in existence at the bottom of the Vermilion Bird Palace's ranking pillar. After all, every disciple in the sect improved their strength very quickly. Although her ranking back then wasn't bad, after so long, the cultivation of the new disciples had already increased. Fortunately, with her current conditions, she didn't need to worry about how many cultivation resources she needed every month. This was the innate condition of being a proud son of heaven. In the past, she had climbed up step by step from the grassroots, but now she was someone with a backer. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang rushed to the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall, Xia Jiqing and Bai Junyu were as anxious as ants on a hot pan. Junyu, could it be that Hongzhuang has cultivated so much that she doesn't even remember the date of the Battle of the 4 Palaces? Xia Jiqing anxiously paced back and forth. Today was the day to confirm the number of disciples participating in the competition between the 4 temples. Although there were many disciples participating in the competition between the 4 palaces, not every disciple could participate. There were many disciples in Tiangang's sect. If every disciple were to participate, then who knew how long this battle of the 4 palaces would have to last? If Bailey Hongzhuang didn't appear today, then she wouldn't be able to participate in the battle of the 4 palaces tomorrow. Bai Junyu obviously didn't expect such a situation to occur. Hongzhuang shouldn't have gone out to cultivate, right? Should we go to the young sect master's bedroom to find her? The young sect master hasn't appeared for a long time. Maybe she isn't in the sect. Chapter 2207. Listening to Xia Jiqing's words, Bai Junyu's face also showed helplessness. Indeed, they were able to go to the young sect master's palace because Bailey Hongzhuang had led them. With their identity, it was impossible for them to set foot there. Even if Hongzhuang doesn't know, the young sect master should know. Bai Junyu couldn't understand. Such an important opportunity. Bailey Hongzhuang must not miss it. I think the palace master is also waiting for Hongzhuang. But if Hongzhuang doesn't appear, the palace master wants to give Hongzhuang a spot. I'm afraid it will only cause criticism. Xia Jiqing's face showed a strong sense of helplessness. Usually Hongzhuang would not be like this. What was going on this time? When Bailey Hongzhuang arrived at the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall, she saw Xia Jiqing and Bai Junyu anxiously waiting. Her face suddenly filled with a smile. Jiqing, Junyu, what are you doing here? Suddenly hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's voice, Xia Jiqing and Bai Junyu were shocked. They only felt that this voice was like the sound of nature, and their eyes instantly turned to Bailey Hongzhuang. Hongzhuang, you're finally here. Xia Jiqing quickly trotted to Bailey Hongzhuang's side. Her delicate and beautiful face was full of anxiety. If you're a little later, I'm afraid there won't be a spot for the competition. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang was slightly stunned. What does this mean? Seeing Bailey Hongzhuang like this, Xia Jiqing knew that Bailey Hongzhuang had no idea what was going on. Today is the day to determine the spots for tomorrow's competition between the 4 palaces. Only 20 disciples of our Vermilion Bird Palace Hall can participate. Just getting a spot for the competition between the 4 palaces is not an easy thing. As soon as these words came out, Bailey Hongzhuang's face was filled with surprise. She only knew that tomorrow's battle of the 4 palaces was very important, but she didn't know that there was a quota for the participants today. Di Beichen didn't tell her about this either. In fact, Di Beichen could not be blamed for this. This was because the palace lords were usually the ones to choose the quotas for the competition of the 4 palaces. With Bailey Hongzhuang's status, no matter what, Qin Ai would always leave a quota for Bailey Hongzhuang. However, the battle of the 4 palaces this time was related to the battle of Zhuolu. Every disciple paid close attention to it. That was why there was such a thing as a selection. It was to make these disciples accept it wholeheartedly. Di Beichen did not participate in the previous battle of Zhuolu, so he naturally did not know about it. What's the situation now? What should I do? Bailey Hongzhuang asked quickly. She had been in seclusion for so long in order to get a quota for the battle of the 4 palaces. If she didn't even have the qualifications to participate, wouldn't she be speechless? Hongzhuang, it is said that this time all disciples above the 5th level of the Green Realm can go in for the assessment. You must have already reached that level, so you should go in quickly. Xia Jiqing said quickly. Bailey Hongzhuang noticed that many disciples of the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall were waiting outside the stone room. Some of the disciples had entered the stone room for the assessment. Those who were not qualified to enter or had already finished the assessment were waiting outside. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. Then I'll go in first. The next moment, Bailey Hongzhuang quickly walked into the stone room. It was already late. If she didn't hurry up, she was afraid that she wouldn't have the opportunity to take the assessment. Chapter 2208. I thought that Bailey Hongzhuang was not going to participate in the competition of the 4 palaces. I didn't expect her to appear today. Although Bailey Hongzhuang is a disciple of the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall, she comes and goes without a trace. I haven't seen her many times in the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. Bailey Hongzhuang is the future wife of the young sect master. This matter is already set in stone. I think even the sect master has agreed. If I were Bailey Hongzhuang, then I would enjoy the resources of the sect. Why would I work so hard to participate in the competition of the 4 palaces? A group of female cultivators felt a strong sense of incomprehension towards Bailey Hongzhuang's behavior. The reason why they worked hard to cultivate was that they could only get sufficient resources after their strength was improved. They may also have a better life in the future. As for Bailey Hongzhuang, she was now a sparrow that had turned into a phoenix. There was no need for her to work so hard. What's more, if she didn't perform well in the competition of the 4 palaces, it would have a bad impact on her. Xia Jiqing and Bai Junyu listened to the thoughts of these female disciples, and suddenly understood why these guys didn't have the opportunity to become a carp that jumped over the dragon's gate. Just this kind of thinking was already impossible. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen never had any dependent relationship between them. They were equal. After Bailey Hongzhuang walked into the stone room, she found that the stone room was unexpectedly spacious. There were several disciples lining up inside. After Qin Ai saw Bailey Hongzhuang appear, a smile suddenly appeared on his face. He was still worried that Bailey Hongzhuang wouldn't appear today. If he forcibly left a spot for Bailey Hongzhuang, it would lead to criticism from the disciples. As the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall Master, even if the disciples criticized him, it wouldn't have any impact on him. However, after participating in the alchemist competition, Bailey Hongzhuang finally had a certain amount of fame. If she was criticized again because of this matter, it was tantamount to returning to the past. When Bailey Hongzhuang saw Qin Ai's smile, she also bowed slightly. Every time she saw Qin Ai, she could feel Qin Ai's goodwill. In the process of waiting, Bailey Hongzhuang discovered that the disciples in the queue all walked towards the Brotherhood statue behind Qin AI after obtaining permission. It was as if, according to the performance of the cultivator, the apparatus would give a corresponding grade. It was divided into 4 levels: heaven, earth, black and yellow. Among them, heaven was the strongest and yellow was the weakest. If the disciples' grade was only at the yellow grade, then they would definitely not be qualified. If it was the Xian rank, there might be a chance, but the chances were slim. If he reached the earth rank, the possibility of obtaining a spot would be very high. As for obtaining the heaven rank, that was definitely not a problem. Bailey Hongzhuang watched as one disciple after another came out of the apparatus. Most of the disciples were of the Xian grade, and occasionally there would be an earth grade. Once an earth rank disciple appeared, Qin AI would record this disciple's name. It's really too difficult to obtain a spot. I don't know how this place determines the qualifications. Although my strength has reached the 5th level of the Green Realm, I don't think it's possible. There are so many disciples in the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. There are only 20 spots in total. It's definitely extremely difficult to obtain a spot. Chapter 2209. Since you're just going through the motions, what are you doing here? What if there's a problem with the apparatus? Or what if my talent isn't tested? Wouldn't it be a waste? Besides, it's good to be recognized by the palace master. One of the disciples smiled. As soon as these words were spoken, many of the disciples present nodded in agreement. Many of them knew that they had no hope of passing the test. However, they still wanted to get lucky. Green Realm Level 5. This was a pretty good cultivation. If the palace master could remember them, it would be a good result. After waiting for the time it takes for a stick of incense to burn, it was Bailey Hongzhuang's turn to go in for the test. Do your best to display your strength. Hold on for as long as you can. Qin AI smiled at Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang bowed slightly. Thank you for your guidance, Palace Master. When the crowd saw Qin AI's kind attitude towards Bailey Hongzhuang, they were envious. This was the difference between them. So many disciples had participated in the test, but the palace master had never told any of them. However, Bailey Hongzhuang was able to receive the palace master's guidance the moment she arrived. Although everyone knew about this, they were still envious. Bailey Hongzhuang walked into the apparatus. The door of the apparatus was closed and no one outside could see what was happening inside. However, when the cultivator left the apparatus, the top of the apparatus would display the cultivator's previous performance. This was the first time Bailey Hongzhuang had seen such an apparatus. She had no idea what kind of test she would face once she entered. However, since Palace Master Qin had reminded her to hold on for as long as she could, she would hold on for as long as she could. As Bailey Hongzhuang walked into the apparatus and the door closed, the apparatus attacked her rapidly. In an instant, it was as if countless hands had appeared in the apparatus and attacked Bailey Hongzhuang. Every fist was filled with powerful force. Once it landed on the cultivator's body, it would be unbearable. The range of this device was very small, so the cultivator's range was also very small. They could only passively receive these attacks. Bailey Hongzhuang's reaction speed was very fast. After seeing the attack coming, she quickly blocked it. Today, her shape-shifting technique has reached the completion stage. Her body was like the wind, ethereal and formless. Fulgurating transposition was a very high-level movement technique, and its ability to dodge was even more impressive. Therefore, even though the range of the device was very small, Bailey Hongzhuang's dodging ability was still extremely shocking. If the cultivators could see the situation in the apparatus, they would definitely be amazed by Bailey Hongzhuang's dodging ability. This was because they could only see a figure changing rapidly like the wind in the device. They could not see its real movements at all. Bailey Hongzhuang's current cultivation was no longer the same as before, and her combat ability had also improved greatly. If it were her in the past, she probably wouldn't have been able to hold on for long. As the time Bailey Hongzhuang spent inside increased, the number and strength of the punches increased. Chapter 2210. After Bailey Hongzhuang entered the apparatus, the disciples who were waiting at the back all paid close attention to the situation of the apparatus. For an influential figure like Bailey Hongzhuang, her results had always attracted attention. I wonder how long Bailey Hongzhuang can last and what level she has reached? I only know that her alchemy skills are extremely powerful, and she was the champion of the assessment competition. However, I have never seen her true abilities and have no idea at all. I feel that since Bailey Hongzhuang's alchemy skills are so powerful, her cultivation shouldn't be that strong. As the disciples' voice faded, the disciples present all nodded their heads. Alchemists were not powerful enough, and this was something that everyone knew. This was because alchemists put all their energy into alchemy and would not spend any more time on cultivation. After hearing the disciples' thoughts, a smile appeared in the depths of Qin Ai's eyes. Bailey Hongzhuang was the granddaughter of the sect leader, and this was not something that could be explained by common sense. Being the champion of the assessment competition was enough to prove how powerful Bailey Hongzhuang was. Ever since Bailey Hongzhuang came to Tiangang sect, she had always been elusive, and he was not sure what level of cultivation Bailey Hongzhuang was at. However, he believed that Bailey Hongzhuang's abilities would not disappoint him. This was because Bailey Hongzhuang and the young sect leader, who was a cultivation maniac, were together. Presumably, both of them were cultivation maniacs. As Bailey Hongzhuang stayed in the apparatus for a longer period of time, the disciples' expressions changed. Bailey Hongzhuang has been in there for a long time. Why hasn't she appeared until now? I don't know. Isn't this apparatus used to determine a cultivator's talent level based on the length of time they stay in there? Bailey Hongzhuang can actually stay in there for so long. Isn't this too strange? Could it be that Bailey Hongzhuang has some special method to stay in there and we don't know about it? The Vermilion Bird Palace Hall disciples were confused. Before this, they had seen many cultivators take the test, but they had never seen a disciple who could stay in there for such a long period of time. The longer the time, the more shocked the disciples became. I remember that disciple who had reached the earth rank had stayed in there for so long. He should have come out by now? A disciple could not help but ask. This time was a little too long. Perhaps Bailey Hongzhuang has really reached the earth rank. After all, the cultivation resources that she has are incomparable to ours. It's not strange for her to reach this level. Another disciple voiced his opinion. Come on the path of cultivation, other than the cultivator's own talent and hard work, resources also played a large role. That being said, the disciple still felt sour grapes when he spoke. When Qin Ai saw that Bailey Hongzhuang had not come out after such a long time, a satisfied smile appeared on his face. It looked like Bailey Hongzhuang had not disappointed him. To be able to stay in the apparatus for so long proved that Bailey Hongzhuang had reached the earth rank. This kind of ability was enough to take part in the competition of the four palaces. Although Qin Ai could not be certain whether Bailey Hongzhuang would be able to perform well in the competition of the four palaces. Chapter 22:11. Qin Ai's gaze landed on the apparatus. It was about time for Bailey Hongzhuang to come out. However, after waiting for a while, Qin Ai saw that Bailey Hongzhuang had yet to appear, and his expression instantly became interesting. This time was a little too long. The time for Earth Grade had already been reached. Could it be that Bailey Hongzhuang was about to reach Heaven Grade? When this thought surfaced in Qin Ai's mind, even he himself felt that it was somewhat inconceivable. Heaven Grade, such a grade was extremely rare to appear. When Qin Ai made such a guess, the expressions of the Tiangang sect disciples became even more interesting. They had never seen it for such a long time. Bailey Hongzhuang actually stayed for so long and still hasn't come out. She couldn't have been knocked unconscious inside, right? When a cultivator voiced out his conjecture, the other disciples were also stunned. Speaking of which, such a situation had happened before. The attacks within the apparatus had always been very powerful. If one was not careful and was hit in a vital point, it was very likely that one would faint. Once the cultivator who entered the apparatus fainted, the apparatus would stop attacking. Back then, there was a disciple who fainted forcefully. Everyone waited outside the apparatus for a long time, but there were no signs of her appearing. In the end, even the higher-ups were shocked. Everyone thought that a shocking genius had appeared in the sect. Who would have thought that the so-called genius was carried out in the end and had already fainted? It was really laughable. This story was very widespread in Tiangang's sect. Later on, such a thing had also happened before. This is really hard to say. If Bailey Hongzhuang really fainted in the apparatus, it would be a big joke. Although from a certain point of view, the disciples did not believe that Bailey Hongzhuang would faint in the apparatus. However, if Bailey Hongzhuang did not faint, then Bailey Hongzhuang's grade would be close to heaven grade. Between these two possibilities, everyone obviously believed in the former more. This was because the latter possibility was simply too unbelievable. Palace Master, should we check on Bailey Hongzhuang's situation? The elder beside Qin Ai could not help but suggest. They were well aware of the power of this instrument. Bailey Hongzhuang was young, and she was also an alchemist. It was hard to believe that she could persist for so long. If Bailey Hongzhuang was really unconscious, they had to rescue Bailey Hongzhuang as soon as possible. Once Bailey Hongzhuang's vital parts were injured, it wouldn't be good for Bailey Hongzhuang for too long. Qin Ai frowned. He had never thought of such a possibility before. Now as time passed, he was starting to worry. For so long, he had never understood Bailey Hongzhuang's strength, so he could not determine the result. In an instant, all the disciples' gazes landed on Qin Ai. They did not know what decision the palace master would make. Let's wait for a while, Qin Ai muttered. He believed in Bailey Hongzhuang's strength. If Bailey Hongzhuang was really still persevering, wouldn't they destroy Bailey Hongzhuang's results if they turned on the apparatus now? After hearing Qin Ai's decision, the disciples could not help but sigh. They did not expect the palace master to have such high hopes for Bailey Hongzhuang. It was really unexpected. Chapter 22:12. Time continued to pass. After waiting for a while, Qin Ai noticed that Bailey Hongzhuang still had not emerged from the apparatus. His expression instantly turned into an ugly shade. Could it be that Bailey Hongzhuang's luck was really so bad that she had been struck in a vital spot by an attack from the apparatus and had fallen unconscious? This length of time had exceeded his expectations. Based on Bailey Hongzhuang's level of power, she should not have been able to hold on for such a long time. Palace Lord, let's open the door of the apparatus and take a look. The elder could not help but remind him. If Bailey Hongzhuang had really met with an accident in the apparatus, it would be a disaster. Hearing this, Qin Ai thought for a moment before nodding his head. Bailey Hongzhuang's status was extremely noble. If she had met with any danger and was not treated in time, he would not have the face to face the sect master. Then Qin Ai and the elder walked towards the apparatus. They had to ascertain that Bailey Hongzhuang was safe. When the cultivators who were watching from the sidelines saw Qin Ai's actions, their eyes lit up. It seems that the palace lord also believes that something has happened to Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang has definitely fainted in there. If this news were to spread, it would be a major piece of news. If Bailey Hongzhuang had really fainted, I'm afraid that she would not be able to obtain a place in the competition of the four palaces. Speaking of which, it would be rather embarrassing. Bailey Hongzhuang is a genius pill master. She should just focus on refining pills. There's no need for her to fight with us for such a small number of places in the competition. The disciples were delighted to see this. With one less competitor, their chances of obtaining a place in the competition would increase. This was undoubtedly the best outcome. Just as Qin Ai and the elder were about to open the door to the apparatus, a voice suddenly rang out. Then, under the astonished gazes of the crowd, Bailey Hongzhuang opened the door to the apparatus and walked out. When Bailey Hongzhuang saw Qin Ai and the elder standing outside the door of the instrument, her face couldn't help but be filled with doubt. Hallmaster elders, what are you doing? Previously, when the disciples were taking the test, the palace master and the elders were standing at a relatively far place. Why were they suddenly here now? Upon hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Qin Ai and the elders' expressions froze for a moment. Soon after, they revealed somewhat embarrassed smiles. From the looks of it, Bailey Hongzhuang did not faint in the machine. Bailey Hongzhuang, did you just finish the test? The elder couldn't help but ask. He still couldn't believe that Bailey Hongzhuang had stayed in the device for so long that it was hard to believe. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded and said matter-of-factly, yes. When the disciples saw Bailey Hongzhuang's reaction, they couldn't help but look at each other. Was Bailey Hongzhuang telling the truth? This must be fake, right? How could Bailey Hongzhuang have lasted for such a long time in the machine? Do you think it's possible that Bailey Hongzhuang fainted first, but soon woke up again so she came out? After all, if she had really fainted in the machine, that would be an extremely embarrassing thing. She would never admit to it. What you've said makes sense. That's very likely the case. The disciples nodded and confirmed this guess. Chapter 22:13. Qin Ai sized up Bailey Hongzhuang for a moment but did not say anything. He was also unable to fathom the situation in which Bailey Hongzhuang had entered the apparatus. Bailey Hongzhuang, who initially did not understand what had happened, suddenly understood after hearing the disciples' words. So, everyone had thought that she had fainted in the apparatus? The attacks in the apparatus were very concentrated and strong. It was not easy for her to deal with them. However, she had always kept Qin Ai's words in mind, so she tried her best to hold on for as long as she could. After all, she was determined to win the quota for the competition of the 4 palaces. She could not just hand it over to someone else. Hence, she had given it her all in the apparatus. As long as she could hold on for a long enough time, she would be able to win the quota without any dispute. As for how long she had been in there, Bailey Hongzhuang was not sure either. She had placed all her attention on dealing with the attacks and did not notice the passing of time. Bailey Hongzhuang, do you feel uncomfortable anywhere? Qin Ai thought for a moment and decided to ask. He knew the power of the apparatus very well. If Bailey Hongzhuang had really stayed in there for such a long time, the attacks and power she had to endure would be very terrifying. Bailey Hongzhuang shook her head gently and smiled. Thank you for your concern, Palace Master. I'm fine. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's reply, everyone in the stone room had a strange expression on their faces. In the next moment, a clear and large word appeared on the apparatus. However, when the crowd saw the contents clearly, the disciples present could not help but gasp. Even Qin Ai and the elder were surprised when they saw the 2 words written on it. They never thought that it would really end up like this. Heaven grade. It was a simple word, but it blinded the eyes of all the disciples present. Damn it, am I seeing things? Is that the heaven grade? Is it really the 2 words heaven grade? You're not seeing things. I saw those 2 words too. How long has it been since I've seen a cultivator who has reached the heaven grade? Isn't Bailey Hongzhuang an alchemist? Who can tell me why an alchemist can reach heaven's stage? Don't stop me, I want some peace and quiet. The disciples didn't know what to say. This level proved that Bailey Hongzhuang hadn't fainted in the device. She had been holding on until now. Qin Ai's eyes instantly lit up. He had long expected that Bailey Hongzhuang's powers would not be weak. However, he never thought that Bailey Hongzhuang would actually be able to reach the heaven stage. This result was enough for Bailey Hongzhuang to get a place in the competition. Bailey Hongzhuang, you've given me a huge surprise. Qin Ai did not hide his admiration and optimism. Previously, during the alchemist competition, Bailey Hongzhuang had already given him a surprise. He did not expect that this time, Bailey Hongzhuang would give him an even bigger surprise. Even in the 4 palaces, there weren't many cultivators who had reached the heaven grade. This time, perhaps Bailey Hongzhuang would be able to bring glory to the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall in the competition of the 4 palaces. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly. Her smile was elegant and beautiful. Palace Master, you flatter me. Qin Ai and the Palace Master next to him looked at each other and a smile appeared in their eyes. Chapter 22:14. If their results in the competition of the 4 palaces were too poor, then as palace masters and elders, they would also lose face. Although the four palace masters usually looked as if they did not care much, in fact, all of them hoped that their own disciples would be able to perform well in this competition of the four palaces. Bailey Hongzhuang could achieve such results. At least the strength of their Vermilion Bird Palace Hall had increased by a few points. The next moment, Qin Ai's gaze fell on the other disciples in the stone room, and a majestic aura instantly broke out. Regarding Bailey Hongzhuang's results, no one can leak it out, do you all understand? Bailey Hongzhuang had never shown her strength in cultivation since she entered Tiangang's sect. In the eyes of the other disciples, Bailey Hongzhuang's cultivation was a mystery. In that case, why not hide Bailey Hongzhuang's strength first? In this way, she could also become their Vermilion Bird Palace Hall's trump card. Yes, this disciple understands. As Qin Ai's voice fell, the disciples nodded one after another. They all understood Qin Ai's reason for doing so. Although in each palace hall, the disciples competed fiercely for the quota. However, when the battle of the four palaces truly began, they would belong to the same branch palace. Only when the disciples of the palace hall obtained a good ranking could they get more cultivation resources. Therefore, such a secret would never be leaked out. After receiving the disciples' answer, Qin Ai nodded and looked at Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang, you go back first. When the assessment is completely over and the participants have been decided, I will send someone to inform you. At that time, I will tell the 20 participating disciples about the rules of the competition and what to pay attention to. Facing Bailey Hongzhuang, Qin Ai's attitude was much gentler and more cordial. As soon as these words came out, Bailey Hongzhuang understood that the quota for the competition of the four palaces was already in her bag. After walking out of the stone room, Bailey Hongzhuang saw Xia Jiqing and Bai Junyu still waiting for her outside the stone room. After seeing Bailey Hongzhuang come out, Xia Jiqing and Bai Junyu immediately greeted her. Hongzhuang, how are you? Did you get a spot? Xia Jiqing quickly asked. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and nodded. I've already gotten a spot. As soon as these words came out, Xia Jiqing and Bai Junyu's faces both showed a smile. That's great. I knew that with your strength you would definitely be able to get a spot. By the way, Hongzhuang, what happened in the stone room just now? We only heard a series of gasps, as if something terrible had happened? Xia Jiqing's face was full of curiosity. Not only them, but the disciples outside the stone room were also very curious. If it wasn't for the fact that they couldn't go in to take a look, many disciples would have already gone in to check it out. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang thought for a moment and said, actually, nothing much happened. It's just that some of the disciples were of a higher level, so everyone was very surprised. Since Qin Ai told everyone not to spread this news, then he must have his reasons. Therefore, Bailey Hongzhuang did not mention it. Then what do we do now? Go back? Bai Junyu asked. Previously, he and Xia Jiqing had already been tested, but with the strength of the two of them, there was still a certain distance to get a spot. Chapter 22:15. There's nothing else, let's go back. Bailey Hongzhuang's lips were slightly raised. Her smile was clear and charming. Along the way, Bailey Hongzhuang listened to Xia Jiqing talk about a lot of things that had happened recently. They often contacted Gong Shaoqing and the others, and now Lu Qingyue often gathered with them. Although Lu Qingyue had not been in the alchemy hall for a long time, with her strength and beauty, she was very popular in the alchemy hall. Similarly, Gong Shaoqing and Lu Qinyue's relationship also had some progress, and there were even disciples who challenged Gong Shaoqing for Lu Qinyue. Bailey Hongzhuang did not know about these things before, but now she found it very interesting. After Bailey Hongzhuang returned to the house to rest for about 2 hours, a disciple came to find her, saying that the hall master had informed her to go to the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. Bailey Hongzhuang came to the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall under the guidance of a disciple. This was the first time she came to the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. This was naturally smaller than the Tiangang Sect's hall, but it was red all over and looked very eye-catching. When Bailey Hongzhuang arrived, there were already many disciples gathered in the hall. Among them, Qin Ai was sitting on the main seat, looking at the disciples present with a smile. After Bailey Hongzhuang arrived, The eyes of some disciples fell on Bailey Hongzhuang. Suddenly, many disciples frowned. When the other disciples were looking at Bailey Hongzhuang was also looking at the other disciples. With this look, Bailey Hongzhuang found that there were no familiar faces among the 20 disciples. Obviously, these disciples were the old disciples of the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall, and it was extremely difficult for the new disciples to compete with the old disciples for this quota. After all, the old disciples' cultivation time was much longer than the new disciples, and their strength was naturally not comparable to the new disciples. Bailey Hongzhuang also got a quota? She is the only one among the new disciples. Could it be that she got the quota by relying on the young sect master? What's impossible about that? We don't have Bailey Hongzhuang's ability, so we can only rely on ourselves. The competition of the 4 palaces this time concerns the honor of our Vermilion Bird Palace Hall, as well as the allocation of cultivation resources for our disciples. If we allow Bailey Hongzhuang to participate, wouldn't that be equivalent to us losing a spot for no reason? In this kind of matter, young sect master and palace master are actually so biased, it's simply too disappointing. A group of old disciples looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with a bit of dissatisfaction. They were all disciples who cultivated blindly in order to make themselves strong enough to be outstanding. To them, Bailey Hongzhuang was someone who got in through the back door, so they were unhappy from the bottom of their hearts. As for Bailey Hongzhuang's performance in the alchemist competition, what did that have to do with cultivation? Since her pill refining skills were so good, then she should stay in the cultivation palace and not harm others here. Bailey Hongzhuang noticed the unkind gazes from the surrounding disciples, but she didn't mind it too much. Anyway, tomorrow was the start of the competition of the 4 palaces, and their true abilities would be revealed on the tournament stage. Since everyone is here, then let me introduce the rules of tomorrow's competition. Qin Ai's voice slowly rang out. Chapter 22:16. The Battle of the 4 Palaces is divided into the preliminary round and the final round. The preliminary round uses the elimination system. 20 disciples from each side palace will take part in the Battle of the 4 Palaces. A total of 80 disciples will take part. There is no room for redemption in the preliminary round. Once you fail, you will lose the right to continue. In the first preliminary round, 40 out of 80 will remain. In the second preliminary round, 20 out of 40 will remain. In the third preliminary round, 10 out of 20 will remain. After the preliminary round, the remaining 10 disciples will enter the final round. The first round of the final round will be the same as the preliminary round. Out of 10 disciples, only 5 will remain. The last 5 disciples will take turns to fight, and the disciple with the most wins will win the first place. Following Qin Ai's words, Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest instantly understood. The rules were simple and easy to understand. They only needed to win 3 rounds in a row to enter the final round. As for the martial arts championship, every sect will have 10 places and the young sect master will participate as well. Hence, the disciples who have been eliminated in the first round of the final round will participate in the ranking round again to determine the places for the martial arts championship. Basically, as long as you enter the final round, you will more or less win a place for the martial arts championship. Qin Ai's face was filled with a faint smile. He knew that the disciples were very concerned about the martial arts championship. If he did not make this clear to everyone, they would be very anxious. Rather than that, he might as well make it clear to them. This way, everyone would be able to pay more attention to every round. Once they lost, they would miss the opportunity to enter the martial arts championship. Sure enough, when everyone heard this, their eyes immediately lit up. They only needed to do their best to win 3 rounds in a row, and they would more or less win a place for the martial arts championship. Qin Ai noticed the joy on everyone's faces and began to wake them up. It looks like you only need to win 3 rounds in a row to win a place, but winning every round is not an easy task. The disciples who are taking part in the Battle of the 4 Palaces are the most outstanding disciples from each side palace, and their powers are definitely not weak. Hence, you must not harbor any feelings of love rivals. There was not much difference in the powers of the 4 palaces. Every battle of the four palaces was a fierce battle, and the results would not be known until the end. It may seem easy to win 3 rounds in a row, but luck played a role in this as well. If you met a strong opponent as soon as you entered the arena, then you could only say that you were unlucky and were eliminated as soon as you entered the arena. However, other than the trump cards of the various branch palaces, the strength of the majority of the disciples was not too different. Therefore, the element of luck would be slightly better. Disciple will keep that in mind. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others replied with a salute. Bailey Hongzhuang thought to herself, the process of this competition was not complicated, but it was clear that winning each round was not an easy task. She didn't know much about the strength of the Tiangang sect's disciples. Similarly, she didn't know what level she was at. According to the situation of her cultivation with Di Beichen during this period of time, presumably her strength should not be too bad in Tiangang sect. These disciples were all older than her, and had cultivated for a longer time than her. Moreover, she was not the only one who had obtained first place in the assessment competition. Chapter 22:17. In addition, I have one more thing to remind everyone. When your opponent's strength is not enough to display all your means, you can look at the situation and hide your strength. Once all your cards are exposed in the early stage, it is very likely that you will be targeted. Qin Ai had been the palace master of Tiangang sect for so many years, so she was very clear about this situation. Once targeted, it would be even more difficult to win. The disciples nodded and remembered Qin Ai's words in their hearts. Because the participants of the competition of the four palaces were all very famous disciples of the four palaces, this competition of the four palaces would go on for several days. Every time the competition of the four palaces was held, it was a big event for Tiangang sect. All the disciples would temporarily put aside their cultivation and other matters to watch the competition of the four palaces. After all, even if they couldn't participate, watching the battle of the powerful disciples could also make them gain some benefits. Therefore, each disciple would only participate in one battle a day. This was also to allow the disciples to recover their fighting strength better, so that they could break out their true strength on the martial arts stage. Speaking of which, only the first day had the most battles. The number of battles would decrease every day, but there would be more and more disciples watching. After Qin Ai told everyone the things they needed to pay attention to, everyone left the meeting hall. Tomorrow was the day when the competition of the four palaces would begin. Everyone had to go back and prepare well for tomorrow's battle. The next day, Bailey Hongzhuang got up early. Because today was the 80th elimination round, there would be a total of 40 battles, so the competition of the four palaces would start very early. As for whether these 40 battles would be divided into 1 day or 2 days, this would depend on the situation. As soon as Bailey Hongzhuang walked out of the house, she found that there were many disciples outside the house who were setting off for the competition venue. It was the first time that Bailey Hongzhuang had seen such a lively scene. Hongzhuang, if you are ready, let's go together. Xia Jiqing looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with a smile. They were not qualified to compete, so today's main purpose was to watch Bailey Hongzhuang compete. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. Okay. As a disciple who was going to participate in the competition today, he definitely couldn't be late. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two had already set off very early. However, when they arrived at the competition venue, they discovered that there was already a sea of people in the vicinity. As far as the eye could see, there was only a sea of black heads moving about. It was impossible to tell who was who. Bailey Hongzhuang glanced at the surrounding area that could hold tens of thousands of spectators, and she understood that this place must have been specially prepared for the Battle of the Four Palaces. In Tiangang sect, perhaps only the competition between the four halls could attract so many people. Not only the disciples, but the palace masters and elders had also arrived early. The four hall masters and the hall master of the alchemy hall had already sat down on the high platform. As they looked at the lively scene, they all smiled. In the middle of the 5 palace masters, there was an empty seat, which was obviously reserved for Di Beichen. After Bailey Hongzhuang looked around, she greeted Xia Jiqing and the other two and went to the area where the participating disciples of the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall were located. Chapter 22:18. After all, if the participating disciples did not stay in one place to wait for the battle, it would not be easy for that person to walk up to the tournament stage from the crowd when the call came. The disciples from the 4 side palaces stood in 4 different areas and were not too far apart. At this moment, they were full of energy and looked around in high spirits. Today was the stage for them to perform. As outstanding cultivators, they were very willing to let everyone know how powerful they were. By the time Bailey Hongzhuang arrived, more than half of the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall's participating disciples had already arrived. She stopped at the back of the crowd. As soon as she appeared, Bailey Hongzhuang could feel a lot of disdainful gazes falling on her. Yesterday, ever since they found out that Bailey Hongzhuang would be taking part in the Battle of the 4 Palaces, the participating disciples had gone back to ask about the results of the test that Bailey Hongzhuang had entered the apparatus. However, all the disciples who were asked shook their heads as if they could not say anything. Most importantly, the palace lord had instructed them not to say anything. After finding out the answer, the participating disciples understood the answer even more clearly. They did not need to think to know that Bailey Hongzhuang's powers had not reached the standard to take part in the Battle of the 4 Palaces. It was only because of her status as the young sect master that Bailey Hongzhuang had been given a place. In order to cause an even bigger commotion, the palace lord had ordered all the disciples to keep their mouths shut. But so what if they had kept their mouths shut? One would only need to think carefully to know the answer. Hence, the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall's participating disciples looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with even more unfriendly gazes. They had relied on their own hard work to get to where they were today. Bailey Hongzhuang had only relied on one layer of relationship to obtain all of this so easily. Some of the disciples could not help but wonder if Bailey Hongzhuang would use this layer of relationship to directly obtain a place in the Battle of the Deer. If that was really the case, it would be too unfair to them. This Bailey Hongzhuang really likes to be in the limelight. Since she's an alchemist, she should just be an alchemist obediently. Why must she come here to join in the fun? I don't believe that young sect master will still give her a place in the battle for the throne if she can't enter the finals. That's right. If that's the case, even the young sect master won't be able to escape the gossip. The disciples of the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with displeasure. The other disciples in the group were all powerful people and they knew each other well. Only this Bailey Hongzhuang was nothing. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows slightly when she heard the discussion of the disciples. It seemed that everyone had a lot of opinions about her. Master, these fellows' words are too harsh. I'll go scold them. Xiao He had always been hot-tempered. She could not hold back at all when faced with such a situation. Before Bailey Hongzhuang could stop her, Xiao He's angry voice rang out. What are you guys talking about? You don't know anything. If you don't have the power, just say it. Why are you still pretending to be all high and mighty? What other abilities do you have apart from belittling others? Xiao He placed her hands on her hips and stood on Bailey Hongzhuang's shoulder. She looked as if she could hold back 10,000 men and compete to see who could scold the other more. The disciples of the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall had originally wanted to ridicule Bailey Hongzhuang. No one had expected that Bailey Hongzhuang's contracted beast would actually start scolding her. Chapter 22:19. If Bailey Hongzhuang knew what these disciples were thinking, she too would not be able to resist ridiculing them. Yesterday she was just too lazy to bother about it, not that she didn't dare to bother about it. To her, the amount of criticism she had suffered along the way was just too much and she had long stopped caring about what others thought. After all, people lived for themselves and she couldn't be bothered about what others thought. But when Xiao He said that, the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall's disciples' gazes all fell onto Bailey Hongzhuang. From their point of view, they didn't think that it was Xiao He who had scolded them. It must be Bailey Hongzhuang who had instigated her contracted beast to stand out and scold them. This move was truly despicable enough. What we've said is the truth. If you hadn't relied on your relationship with the young sect master, how could you possibly obtain the quota to take part in the competition of the 4 palaces? Tan Yuahan's face was filled with displeasure and anger. As a lady, she had put in a huge amount of effort to obtain her current position in the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall, which was filled with talents. Originally, she was the limelight in the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. But ever since Bailey Hongzhuang appeared, everyone's attention had shifted onto Bailey Hongzhuang. On one hand, it was because Bailey Hongzhuang could possibly be the future young sect master's wife. On the other hand, it was because of Bailey Hongzhuang's outstanding looks. However, this Bailey Hongzhuang obviously didn't have a body constitution that attracted people's affection. Even though Bailey Hongzhuang's background and looks weren't bad, but she was still the target of suspicion in the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. However, ever since the alchemist competition had ended, the situation had changed and many disciples had changed their views towards Bailey Hongzhuang. She was originally feeling displeased, but Bailey Hongzhuang was only an alchemist and didn't have much interaction with her, so she didn't mind. However, Bailey Hongzhuang had now taken part in the competition of the 4 palaces, so naturally she felt extremely displeased when she saw Bailey Hongzhuang. You idiot! My master got it with his own ability, and I'll say that you got it by relying on some messy connections. Xiao He was an expert at stirring up trouble. It did not care what other people said. Anyway, it did not know what they were talking about. All it needed to do was to slander them. Everything was that simple. You're talking nonsense. Tan Lihan was so angry that her chest heaved up and down. It was obvious that Xiao He was furious. You're the one who's talking nonsense. Your whole family is full of nonsense. Xiao He hopped on Bailey Hongzhuang's shoulder. She was best at talking. Even if a few more people were to scold her, she would not be afraid at all. Xiao Bai was also good at fighting, but now that it saw that Xiao He was able to completely stun this guy, there was no need for it to step forward and show off its strength. Bailey Hongzhuang had never been afraid of shedding all pretense of cordiality. Usually she couldn't be bothered to say it because she couldn't be bothered. However, when this kind of thing really happened, she didn't care in the slightest. Since so many people in the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall were not convinced, then she would make them completely convinced. There was only one way to do it. Beat them up. Bailey Hongzhuang, don't go overboard. Tan Lihan stared angrily at Bailey Hongzhuang. Her voice had not been the loudest, but she never thought that after Xiao He had spoken, she would be the only one to speak. Chapter 2220. The Vermilion Bird Palace Hall's participating disciples were all looking at the conflict between Tan Lihan and Bailey Hongzhuang with great interest. Previously, when everyone was verbally attacking Bailey Hongzhuang, they naturally didn't mind joining in. However, since Bailey Hongzhuang had started to retaliate no matter what, they still had to take into account the young sect master's identity. Even if they felt disdain towards Bailey Hongzhuang for breaking the rules to obtain such a quota, but the young sect master's identity was there. If they were to directly clash with Bailey Hongzhuang now, wouldn't that mean that they were dissatisfied with the young sect master and palace master Qin's decision? The bird that sticks out gets shot, so they would never do something that was disadvantageous to themselves. However, for a hothead like Tan Lihan to be willing to directly clash with Bailey Hongzhuang, they were happy to see that. Seeing that Tan Lihan had taken the initiative to provoke her, Bailey Hongzhuang lightly turned around and her cold and distant gaze sized up Tan Lihan for a moment. Her red lips parted slightly and her voice was cold. Tan Lihan, from the beginning to the end, it was you who was attacking me and I didn't say a single word. Now you're asking me not to go overboard? Bailey Hongzhuang's expression became increasingly cold and her eyes were as cold as ice. I think you're the one who shouldn't go overboard. Following Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Tan Lihan's expression froze. From the looks of it, the matter indeed seemed to be as such. That's not right. Tan Lihan wasn't intimidated by Bailey Hongzhuang's words as she continued. Doesn't your contracted beast's words represent your own words? That's what you think, not what I said. Bailey Hongzhuang's expression was indifferent and her state was elegant. She didn't seem to care about Tan Lihan's words at all. Looking at Bailey Hongzhuang's indifferent look, Tan Lihan felt even more displeased. It was obvious that Bailey Hongzhuang was the one who had no ability. Now, Bailey Hongzhuang was standing at the top to criticize her. This was too funny. Bailey Hongzhuang, I didn't expect you to be so good at quibbling. This must be how you got your ability to get in through the back door, right? You obviously don't have the strength, yet you still took up a spot. You are really shameless. Tan Lihan originally had some scruples about Bailey Hongzhuang's identity, but now that she was angry, she couldn't care less. As soon as these words came out, the disciples present all looked at each other in dismay. It seemed that the conflict between Tan Lihan and Bailey Hongzhuang was about to escalate. No matter how calm Bailey Hongzhuang was, in the face of Tan Lihan's accusation, she would definitely lose face. Just when everyone thought that Bailey Hongzhuang was about to go crazy, Bailey Hongzhuang sneered and her lips curled into a mocking smile. Even if I got in through the back door, what has that got to do with you? If you have the ability, you can get in through the back door. If you don't have the ability, then shut your mouth. Besides, against a pig-like opponent like you, Bailey Hongzhuang disdained to get in through the back door. After Bailey Hongzhuang's words came out, she couldn't even be bothered to look at Tan Lihan. That look was filled with disdain towards Tan Lihan, and even looking at her was a waste of time. Tan Lihan was stunned. The disciples present were all stunned. Was Bailey Hongzhuang admitting that she had gotten in through the back door? But just as Bailey Hongzhuang had said, towards Bailey Hongzhuang being able to get in through the back door, most of the disciples were envious and jealous. Who asked them to not be able to do it? Chapter 22-21. Through the back door? She really did not have that ability, however. Bailey Hongzhuang had actually said that she was a pig-like opponent? Bailey Hongzhuang was only a new disciple, and a new disciple who had spent all her energy on refining pills. Now, she had actually said that she was a pig-like opponent? Tan Lihan only felt a surge of anger in her chest, and she spat out a mouthful of blood. Based on her, Tan Lihan's ranking in the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall, who would dare to say that she was a pig-like opponent? Just as Tan Lihan was about to rebut Bailey Hongzhuang, a low and cold voice rang out. Tan Lihan, since you are already well aware of it, why continue to fuss over it? Hearing this voice, Tan Lihan was slightly taken aback. She immediately looked towards the man who had spoken, and her face instantly turned red as she nodded. Bailey Hongzhuang also looked towards the man who had spoken. The man was handsome, and his posture was steady and cold. His coldness was different from Gong Shaoqing's indifference. His coldness was more like a form of contempt. He despised everyone around him, so he was very cold. Because these people were unable to receive any of his attention. Shen Xiuhan, the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall's #1 disciple, was a cultivation maniac. Usually, the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall's disciples rarely saw Shen Xiuhan. Even if it was the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall's internal competitions, Shen Xiuhan would not even bother to participate. However, even though Shen Xiuhan rarely appeared, his position as #1 was still extremely stable. He had a very high reputation in the hearts of the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall's disciples. The existence of the most powerful cultivator had always attracted attention. Shen Xiuhan glanced coldly at Bailey Hongzhuang. It was just a glance, but Bailey Hongzhuang could clearly see that it was full of disdain. It was as if Bailey Hongzhuang, a person who had walked through the back door without any real talent, was beneath his notice. Compared to Tan Lihan's provocation, Bailey Hongzhuang felt that Shen Xiuhan's disdain was even more unpleasant. Who did this guy think he was? How dare he look at her with such a gaze? Fuck, this guy really knows how to act cool. When Xiaohei saw Shen Xiuhan, she couldn't help but curse. It wasn't that she had never seen a pretentious person, but she had never seen such a pretentious person. Even young masters like Di Beichun Wen Ziren, and even Mo Yunjue wouldn't dare to look at master with such a gaze. Who the hell did this guy think he was? As the #1 expert of the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall, if he doesn't show off, how can he show off how extraordinary he is? However, I'm curious if he can still maintain his arrogance and disdain when he's beaten to the ground. Xiao Bai sneered. Acting tough will get you struck by lightning. Xiao Hei, Xiao Bai, and Little White Lion were beasts who loved to show off. Now that there was someone who could show off better than them, they were very displeased. They should be the ones in charge of being in the limelight and having their own halo. The voices of the three beasts were not soft, and in an instant, all the participating disciples of the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall heard them clearly. Instantly, everyone's expressions became interesting. Shen Xiuhan's expression stiffened, and his expert demeanor was almost broken. Where had Bailey Hongzhuang found such a top-grade contracted beast? He, Shen Xiuhan, had always shown such an attitude after coming to Tiangang's sect. Who dared to criticize him? Chapter 22-22. Even though his anger had reached its peak, Shen Xiuhan still managed to hold back his anger. As the number one disciple of the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall, if he were to argue with Bailey Hongzhuang like this, it would be a loss of grace. If word got out, it would be extremely disadvantageous to him. After all, he rarely argued with others on a daily basis. There was only one way for him to argue, and that was to teach the other party a lesson. However, Bailey Hongzhuang had not said anything. The ones who had spoken were Bailey Hongzhuang's contracted beasts. If word of this got out, he would undoubtedly lose all face. After all, Bailey Hongzhuang could say that this matter had nothing to do with him. However, if he were to argue in secret, he would be too petty. Furthermore, teaching Bailey Hongzhuang a lesson was not urgent. After the Battle of the Four Palaces had begun, he would use his own power to make Bailey Hongzhuang understand that he was not acting pretentious. When the cultivators of the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall saw that Shen Xiuhan had maintained his silence, their expressions became a little more interesting. It must be said that Shen Xiuhan's usual arrogant and cold style was not the least bit approachable. Many of the disciples were unhappy, but because of Shen Xiuhan's power, they could only swallow their anger. Now that Bailey Hongzhuang's three contracted beasts had directly exposed Shen Xiuhan's pretense, they felt extremely delighted. It must be said that they enjoyed a clash between cultivators of such status very much. Tan Lihan glared angrily at Bailey Hongzhuang. Her bright eyes filled with anger and hatred. She had always admired Shen Xiuhan. From her point of view, Shen Xiuhan was her future man. Usually, she worshipped Shen Xiuhan the most. Shen Xiuhan was her sky. As a female disciple, Shen Xiuhan was the main reason why she had been able to cultivate to her current level of power. Compared to Bailey Hongzhuang's mockery of her, she was even more dissatisfied with Bailey Hongzhuang's insults towards Shen Xiuhan. No one had ever dared to say such things about Shen Xiuhan. The male god in her heart would not allow anyone to slander him. Tan Lihan had already remembered this grudge in her heart. The battle between the four palaces was about to begin. No matter how arrogant Bailey Hongzhuang was, she would not be able to stay arrogant for long. On the contrary, Shen Xiuhan was the main character of this battle. What she hoped for the most now was to be able to meet Bailey Hongzhuang on the tournament stage. However, in the competition between the four palaces, disciples from different palaces would face off against disciples from different palaces. She was afraid that she would not have much of a chance. With Bailey Hongzhuang's strength, it was impossible for her to enter the finals. For Bailey Hongzhuang, this incident was just an interlude. Soon, Bailey Hongzhuang turned her attention to the stage. Under everyone's amazed and admiring gazes, a faint golden figure slowly appeared in everyone's line of sight. The five palace masters hurriedly stood up and bowed deeply to the handsome man who was slowly walking over. The man looked as if he had walked over under the sun, like the stars surrounding the moon, noble and elegant, unparalleled. In a split second, all the brilliance seemed to be enveloped by Di Beichen. Everyone's eyes were fixed on this figure. Bailey Hongzhuang's lips slowly curled into a smile. Di Beichen was such a breathtaking existence. No matter where he was, he would always be the focus of attention. Chapter 22-23. Just one smile, that moment of youth. Even in such a crowd, they could still see each other at a glance. Debachin slowly sat down and waved his hand slightly. The crowd of disciples then stood up straight, full of vigor and anticipation. Quite a number of disciples had noticed Debachin's smile towards Bailey Hongzhuang, and they couldn't help but sigh in their hearts. The young sect master's feelings towards Bailey Hongzhuang were indeed not ordinary. Tan Lihan glared hatefully at Bailey Hongzhuang, her heart feeling extremely indignant. She just couldn't stand looking at Bailey Hongzhuang. Apart from her outstanding looks and bewitching looks, everything else about this woman was just average. However, the young sect master's honorable presence was actually so affectionate towards Bailey Hongzhuang. It was really hard to imagine. In terms of looks, she felt that her looks weren't too bad either. In comparison, she had liked Shen Xiuhan for a very long time, but he had never expressed his feelings towards her. Although her power couldn't be compared to Shen Xiuhan's, it wasn't too bad. The gap between the two of them wasn't that huge, but she could always feel that Shen Xiuhan cared about her. However, the gap between Bailey Hongzhuang and the young sect master was simply a chasm that was difficult to cross. Even so, the young sect master had still acknowledged Bailey Hongzhuang's existence in front of everyone. The gap between the two of them was just too big. While Tan Lihan was glaring hatefully at Bailey Hongzhuang, Bailey Hongzhuang didn't pay any attention to Tan Lihan. However, she could still feel her gaze. It looked like Tan Lihan really hated her this time. But even so what? Since the young sect master is here, let's begin the competition between the four palaces, shall we? Qin Ai's face was filled with a warm and benevolent smile as he asked Debachin respectfully. Debachin nodded slightly and said, "Since everyone is here, let's begin." After receiving Debachin's approval, the palace masters and elders were all smiles. Debachin immediately stood up and looked at the dense crowd of disciples below the high platform. His voice was magnetic and loud. The Battle of the Four Halls has always been a tradition of the Tiangang sect. The ranking of the Battle of the Four Halls is also related to the distribution of resources in the following period of time. Presumably, everyone was paying close attention to this competition between the four palaces, and had been looking forward to it for a long time. At the same time, everyone should know that this Battle of the Four Palaces will affect the Battle of Zhualu in 3 months' time. Once one participates in the Battle of Zhualu, as long as one performs well in the Battle of Zhualu, one's name will truly spread throughout the world. Therefore, in this competition between the four palaces, I hope that everyone will be able to bring out their true strength. As Debachin's voice fell, the eyes of all the disciples present lit up, especially those participating in the competition. This was a crucial moment for their future. Speaking of which, the disciples who were participating in the Battle of the Four Palaces felt that they were exceptionally lucky. Coincidentally, the Battle of the Four Palaces was related to the quota for the Battle of Zhualu. If it had been any other time, they wouldn't have had such an opportunity. I believe that everyone is ready. Then, I hereby announce that the Battle of the Four Palaces has officially begun. In a split second, the atmosphere in the entire battle arena changed. All the disciples looked at the stage with great anticipation. The exciting competition would begin here. Chapter 22-24. Under everyone's gaze, Xiaoingzi slowly stood up. The Great Elder had completely disappeared from Tiangang sect. Therefore, Xiaoingzi, who was originally the second elder, was now the Great Elder of Tiangang sect. The preliminary round uses the method of drawing lots. Disciples who draw the same number will compete with each other. The order of the competition will be determined according to this number. Number 1 is the disciple in the first round of the competition. Number 40 is the disciple in the last round of the competition. Does everyone understand? In the process of this competition, only drawing lots was the fairest method. Disciples understand. The participating disciples of the 4 major branch halls responded one after another. Now, the participating disciples can come up to the stage to draw lots. Listening to Xiaoingzi's words, the disciples of the 4 major branch halls walked up to the high platform one after another. This drawing lots was also an opportunity for them to show their abilities. When every disciple walked up to the high platform, there would be a burst of discussion below the high platform. As the existence of the top 20 of each branch hall of Tiangang sect, they had always been known by everyone. The participating disciples were even more arrogant. They were already the existence of powerhouses to be able to obtain a place in this competition. Bailey Hongzhuang also walked up to the high platform. After drawing her lot, she walked back to her original position. When Bailey Hongzhuang walked back to the preparation position of the participating disciples, she found that everyone's position was according to the order of the competition. In this way they could also see who their next opponent was. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes lit up. Everything was really simple and clear. Bailey Hongzhuang was number 27. Her appearance was a little late, so her position was also a little further back. Her opponent was a male disciple of the Azure Dragon Hall. However, she didn't know much about the Azure Dragon Hall, and didn't know how strong her opponent was. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the male disciple's gaze also fell on Bailey Hongzhuang. The moment he saw Bailey Hongzhuang, the male disciple was obviously stunned for a moment. After he reacted, he revealed a smile. Bailey Hongzhuang also responded with a smile. Tan Lihan and Shun Xiuhan's rankings were relatively high. Tan Lihan was in the 7th round, while Shun Xiuhan was in the 15th round. Coincidentally, she could also understand their strength through their competition. After drawing lots, the first round of the competition began. There was only one huge battling platform in this huge martial arts arena. The scale was extremely vast. After the referee elder introduced the names of the 2 disciples and the sub-palaces they came from, the competition officially began. This battle was just as Bailey Hongzhuang had expected. The strength of each disciple selected from the sub-palace was not weak. On this martial arts stage they even used all their skills. Their combat strength was very astonishing. Therefore they were in a stalemate when they exchanged blows. Both sides were in a deadlock, and no one could do anything to the other for a while. However, one couldn't help but admit that the strength of these disciples was really outstanding. The collision of their martial skills and battle experience would often cause the disciples in the spectators' stand to cry out in surprise. Through watching this competition, they understood the difference in strength between themselves and the disciples on the ranking board. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang was watching the competition, a voice rang out beside Bailey Hongzhuang. Chapter 22-25. Hearing this unfamiliar voice, Bailey Hongzhuang was a little surprised. She had never met this Yichengyu before. However, since the other party took the initiative to express goodwill, Bailey Hongzhuang didn't mind making another friend. Of course, the premise was that the other party didn't have any other thoughts. So it's senior brother Yi. Sorry for the disrespect. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled lightly. Junior sister Bailey doesn't spend much time in the palace. I presume you don't know much about your opponents. I've always liked to collect information, especially about the participating disciples. I have some understanding of their strength. Why don't I introduce them to junior sister Bailey? Yichengyu was obviously a friendly person. After seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang didn't reject him, he immediately began to introduce. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. She indeed didn't know anything about the participating disciples. This was a bit disadvantageous. If someone could introduce her, she would naturally be very happy. Then I'll have to trouble senior brother Yi. Your opponent is Lu Zhongyang of the Azure Dragon Palace Hall. I can say that junior sister Bailey's luck is very good. Yichengyu smiled lightly. He believed that there were many people who were envious of Bailey Hongzhuang's good luck. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows slightly. She had more or less understood Yichengyu's meaning. This Lu Zhongyang is at the bottom of the participating disciples of the Azure Dragon Palace Hall. If there are no accidents, he will definitely be eliminated in the first round. He is 21 this year and has been in the Tiangang sect for 2 years. His current cultivation is between Green Realm Level 9 and Green Realm Level 1. As far as I know, he was still Green Realm Level 9 before. However, I feel that in order to have a good performance in the competition between the 4 palaces, he must have tried his best to break through to Green Realm Level 1. The last 40 disciples participating in the competition between the 4 palaces have about the same cultivation. However, everyone's fighting strength is different. However, the first place of the 4 palaces is much stronger. Yi Chenyu earnestly explained the situation to Bailey Hongzhuang. The participating disciples of Vermilion Bird Palace Hall didn't know of Bailey Hongzhuang's strength, but he did. This was because when Bailey Hongzhuang was taking the test yesterday, he was also in the stone room and personally saw Bailey Hongzhuang's heaven stage. Even in the entire Tiangang sect, how many disciples of this level could appear? Therefore, he knew that Bailey Hongzhuang was not weak. By the time Bailey Hongzhuang stood on the martial arts stage and began to compete, the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall disciples would probably be stunned. He had already admired Bailey Hongzhuang very much during the alchemist competition. In addition, Bailey Hongzhuang was a cultivator who had been evaluated as a heaven stage cultivator, which made him admire her even more. Moreover, Bailey Hongzhuang was very amiable and approachable. He was very happy to have the opportunity to be friends with Bailey Hongzhuang. After Bailey Hongzhuang understood LV Zhongyang's strength, she understood in her heart. She didn't expect that her luck in randomly drawing lots would be so good. This way, she could still hide a certain amount of her strength in the first round of the preliminary competition. I didn't expect Senior Brother Yi to understand the situation of these disciples so well. I really admire you. Originally, Bailey Hongzhuang didn't pay much attention to Yi Chenyu's words. After all, as long as one stayed in Tiangang sect long enough, it was normal to have some understanding of some disciples. Chapter 22-26. Junior Sister Bailey is too polite. With Junior Sister's ability, it's easy for you to obtain this information. It's just that Junior Sister is busy and doesn't know much about it. In fact, most of the disciples participating today have some understanding of their opponents. In this way, we can reduce the possibility of being at a disadvantage when we fight. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. She knew that Yi Chenyu was telling the truth. The Battle of the 4 Palaces this time was related to many things. Every disciple was thinking of ways to make full preparations. It wasn't difficult to obtain information. As long as they walked around a few palaces and spent some resources to inquire, they would definitely be able to obtain the information they wanted. However, none of the disciples were fools. Thus, they would hide some of their strength. However, the gap wouldn't be too big. Bailey Hongzhuang had previously spent all her time on raising her cultivation, and didn't have the time to pay attention to these things. She never thought that Yi Chenyu would tell her about these things. Senior Brother Ye's information is very helpful to me. However, I still want to know some information from Senior Brother. Bailey Hongzhuang slowly said. Yi Chenyu smiled. Junior Sister Bailey, if you have any questions, just tell me. I will tell you everything I know. To him, most of this information was known to everyone. If he could make Bailey Hongzhuang think highly of him, he would be extremely happy. Of course, the information he gathered was more specific than what the ordinary disciples gathered. I wonder if Senior Brother Yi can introduce me to the strongest of the 4 palaces? Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Yi Chenyu. She didn't pay much attention to the strength of the ordinary disciples. However, the strongest of the 4 palaces were definitely extremely powerful. Once they entered the finals, they would definitely encounter each other. She had to understand more. Originally, she planned to wait until the end of today's competition to find out more. However, since there was Yi Chenyu, who was extremely knowledgeable, she naturally wouldn't go too far. This is naturally not a problem. Yi Chenyu smiled. The strongest of the Azure Dragon Hall is called Xiao Feilin. He's 23 years old and has been famous in the Azure Dragon Hall for a long time. When he first entered the Tiangang sect, He was already very powerful and deeply praised by the Azure Dragon Hall Master. Under the nurturing of the Tiangang sect's resources, his potential completely exploded, and the speed at which his strength increased was extremely shocking. For the past year, he had been in seclusion and could be called a cultivation maniac. He had never fought with anyone, so it was difficult to judge his strength. However, it is said that before he went into seclusion, his cultivation had already reached Green Realm level 9. At the mention of Xiao Feilin, Yi Chenyu couldn't help but sigh. The strength of such an expert was simply too shocking. Even if the cultivators behind him tried their best to catch up, they were still too far away. Bailey Hongzhuang secretly exclaimed in her heart. Sure enough, the first rankers of this branch hall were all extremely terrifying existences. Their talent and strength were both astonishing. The strongest person in the White Tiger Hall is called Xiao Feiyu. She and the Azure Dragon Hall's Xiao Feilin are blood siblings. Both of their talents are extremely shocking. However, these two people had always regarded each other as opponents and wanted to defeat each other. Therefore, when they first entered Tiangang sect, they chose different branches. Chapter 22-27. After learning that Xiao Feilin and Xiao Feiyu were actually a pair of siblings, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but sigh. The genes of this pair of siblings were truly amazing. Our Vermilion Bird Palace Hall's #1 expert is Shun Xiuhan. He's 24 years old and very few people are able to communicate with him. Shun Xiuhan can be said to be the most difficult person to approach among the experts of the 4 palaces, but his strength is also admirable. In this year, Shun Xiuhan is the same as Xiao Feilin, always in a state of seclusion and rarely appears in front of everyone. It could be assumed that the experts of the 4 palaces had already known about the Battle of Zhualu. Therefore, they had put all their efforts into improving their cultivation in order to perform well in the Battle of the 4 palaces. The strength of the experts of the 4 palaces is not too different, so the ranking has always been controversial and has never been confirmed. Hearing that, Bailey Hongzhuang glanced at Shun Xiuhan indifferently. Although Shun Xiuhan was arrogant and disdainful, she had to admit that he did have his own abilities. The #1 expert of the Black Martial Hall is Yan Bin. Like his name, he is straightforward and can be said to have a violent temper. Moreover, Yan Bin is famous for being a battle maniac. As long as there is a disagreement, he will start a fight. Thinking back, the Black Martial Hall master also felt very helpless towards Yan Bin. But because Yan Bin is indeed a cultivation genius and has now become the #1 expert of the Black Martial Hall, the previous problems naturally disappeared. Under Yi Chenyu's reminder, Bailey Hongzhuang sized up the appearances of the 4 great experts. Xiao Feilin and Xiao Feiyu were indeed brother and sister. Their appearances were very similar, but after looking at them for a while, she felt that Xiao Feilin was more feminine and Xiao Feiyu was more masculine. As expected, the extremely similar faces were of completely different genders. After looking at them for a long time, it was quite magical. Needless to say, Shun Xiuhan was cold and arrogant, looking down from above, with a bit of the demeanor of an expert. Yan Bin was like his name. Just by looking at his appearance, one could tell that he was not someone to be trifled with. However, his appearance was very outstanding, just like a sunny and handsome man. However, any disciple who had some understanding of Yan Bin knew that all this was just on the surface. If anyone provoked him, it would be really troublesome. Even Shun Xiuhan and the others were not willing to have any conflicts with Yan Bin. When the disciples of the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall saw that Yi Chenyu had taken the initiative to curry favor with Bailey Hongzhuang, they were somewhat astonished. Yi Chenyu's ranking in the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall was also not bad. His strength was also very high. Furthermore, Yi Chenyu had another ability, which was that he was extremely good at gathering information. In fact, although everyone was very unhappy that Bailey Hongzhuang had obtained this quota through the back door, there were still many disciples who wanted to curry favor with Bailey Hongzhuang because of her identity. Therefore, when Tan Lihan and Bailey Hongzhuang clashed, no one helped Tan Lihan. However, no one expected that Yi Chenyu would take the initiative to befriend Bailey Hongzhuang. Moreover, Bailey Hongzhuang also recognized Yi Chenyu as a friend. Yi Chenyu's actions were really fast. When Shen Xiuhan saw that Yi Chenyu and Bailey Hongzhuang were chatting happily, he could not help but furrow his brows. However, he quickly returned to his usual appearance. In the process of this conversation, the competition continued. Chapter 22-28. As long as the disciples ranked in the bottom 40 became their opponents, the competition would take a little more time. However, the higher the ranking of the disciples, the less time they spent in the battle. It was almost as if the battle ended in a single exchange. Just from this point, it could be seen how big the difference in strength between the first and the 20th disciple was. Bailey Hongzhuang faintly sighed. The huge Tiangang sect was really full of talents. Wanting to enter the finals was not an easy task. As for ranking in the front, that was even more difficult. If she had not been in closed-door cultivation for the past 3 months, it would have been impossible for her to obtain a place in the Battle of Zhualu. Very quickly, the first disciple of the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall went up. Bailey Hongzhuang saw that this figure was very familiar because this person was the eldest senior brother of the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall, Gue Jianyuan. Thinking back to the first time she went to the arena, Gue Jianyuan told Bailey Hongzhuang a lot of information about the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall's cultivation. However, she rarely appeared after that and naturally did not have the chance to see Gue Jianyuan again. Bailey Hongzhuang had a very good impression of the approachable Gue Jianyuan. Previously, Gue Jianyuan had been standing very close to the front, so Bailey Hongzhuang did not notice him. Now that she saw Gue Jianyuan go up the stage, she finally noticed. As expected, as the eldest senior brother of the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall, Gue Jianyuan's strength was extremely powerful. Although he was not the #1 expert of the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall, his ranking would definitely not be bad. After Yi Chenyu saw that Bailey Hongzhuang seemed to be very interested in Gue Jianyuan, he could not help but say, as the eldest senior brother of the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall, Gue Jianyuan's strength is ranked second in the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall, second only to Shen Xiuhan. This competition will not put any pressure on Gue Jianyuan. Hearing that, Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. Her thoughts were the same as Yi Chenyu's. The moment Gue Jianyuan and his opponent exchanged blows, the gap between the two could already be seen. Winning was only a matter of time. In the following period of time, the disciples went up one by one. Time quietly passed in this process. However, the enthusiasm of the disciples around the martial arts stage did not decrease in the slightest. Especially when they saw the disciple they admired going up the martial arts stage. It was as if they had been injected with chicken blood, and they cheered endlessly. Of course, there were also many disciples who were ridiculed and belittled. Tan Lihan's strength was not bad either. She was at Green Realm level 2. No wonder she was so arrogant before. In the first preliminary round, Tan Lihan won. After the victory, Tan Lihan looked at Bailey Hongzhuang provocatively, as if to say, "Look, I'm the real deal." Faced with Tan Lihan's provocation, Bailey Hongzhuang generously gave her a thumbs up. However, this thumbs up was directed downwards. Tan Lihan was so angry that she wanted to kill Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang, on the other hand, was grinning from ear to ear. Taunting the opponent was good for venting one's emotions, and it was also good for one's cultivation. In the afternoon, after such a wait, it was finally Bailey Hongzhuang's turn to go up the stage. Round 27. Azure Dragon Palace Hall's Lu Zhengyang vs Vermilion Bird Palace Hall's Bailey Hongzhuang. When the referee elder's voice rang out, the disciples present were all shocked. Compared to the top experts' battles, this battle was also highly anticipated. Chapter 22-29. LV Zhengyang was at the bottom of the Azure Dragon Palace Hall, and everyone knew that he was just a cannon fodder. Of course, being able to become cannon fodder in the competition of the 4 palaces was something that many people could not hope to achieve. However, They did not expect that LV Zhongyang's opponent would be Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang was a genius. This was a fact that none of the Tiangang sect's disciples could deny. However, Bailey Hongzhuang was not a genius cultivator but a genius alchemist. In the alchemist competition, no one was Bailey Hongzhuang's match. However, in the competition of the four palaces, Bailey Hongzhuang was at a disadvantage. Hence, even though LV Zhongyang was at the bottom of the Azure Dragon Palace Hall, everyone still thought that LV Zhongyang would win. When the Azure Dragon Palace Lord, Yan Kaicheng, saw that LV Zhongyang's opponent was actually Bailey Hongzhuang, his expression became a little more interesting. Although LV Zhongyang had defeated Bailey Hongzhuang, the competition of the four palaces was just like that. Even though it was only the first round of the preliminary round, whichever palace had the most disciples left would be a kind of glory. Qin Ai saw through Yan Kaicheng's thoughts at one glance and could not help but laugh secretly. Bailey Hongzhuang's power was not as simple as everyone thought. He also wanted to know what Yan Kaicheng's expression would be when Bailey Hongzhuang defeated LV Zhongyang later on. Thinking of this, Qin Ai felt very happy. Haha. When Yan Kaicheng saw that Qin Ai was not the least bit helpless and instead looked very happy, his thoughts changed a little. Could it be that there was a trap in this matter? Just as this thought appeared in his mind, Yan Kaicheng felt that it was impossible. After all, Bailey Hongzhuang was a new disciple of the Tiangang sect. Participating in the competition of the four palaces was originally a very disadvantageous matter. Among the disciples participating in the competition of the four palaces, other than Bailey Hongzhuang, no one else was a new disciple. Basically, in every battle of the four palaces, the new disciples did not have a chance, but Bailey Hongzhuang was an exception. The other disciples are disciples who have cultivated in Tiangang sect for more than 2 years. Their age and strength are stronger than Bailey Hongzhuang. Therefore, even if Bailey Hongzhuang had failed in the battle of the four palaces, it would be a very normal thing. Lu Zhongyang, your luck is not bad today. You actually drew junior sister Bailey. You will definitely advance to the second round of the preliminaries. The disciples of the Azure Dragon Hall looked at LV Zhongyang with envy. This kind of luck was really enviable. That may not be the case. Junior sister Bailey was able to participate in the competition of the four palaces, which proves that she is very strong. Chapter 2230. Under the high platform, Xia Jiqing and the others saw that it was finally Bailey Hongzhuang's turn to fight, and they couldn't help but be excited. After waiting for so long, Hongzhuang is finally going to fight, haha. We haven't seen Hongzhuang fight for a long time. I don't know what realm Hongzhuang's strength has reached now. Xia Jiqing's face was full of curiosity. In the past, when she cultivated with Hongzhuang every day, watching Hongzhuang's strength increase speed, she only felt that she couldn't catch up. Since entering Tiangang sect, they hadn't seen Bailey Hongzhuang fight again, so they didn't know what realm Bailey Hongzhuang had reached now. Hongzhuang's cultivation talent is very amazing, but the disciples participating in the competition of the four temples have a much longer cultivation time than Hongzhuang. Overall, Hongzhuang is still at a disadvantage. Gong Xiaoqing calmly analyzed the situation in front of him. From the previous battle, it could be seen how strong the disciples participating in the competition of the four temples were. No wonder the new disciples were directly sentenced to death. In the face of such strength, they simply had no chance of winning. Indeed, the disciples of Tiangang sect have no bad talent, so the longer the cultivation time, the more advantage the disciples have. Therefore, among the disciples, only Hongzhuang is the youngest. Dongfang Yu was also somewhat helpless. This was completely an unfair battle for the new disciples. However, Bailey Hongzhuang was able to get the opportunity to participate, which was already very good. Lu Qinyue stared at Bailey Hongzhuang on the high platform. She had a faint feeling that the current Bailey Hongzhuang had completely left them behind. On the martial arts stage, Bailey Hongzhuang and LV Zhongyang stood opposite each other, both of their faces showing a polite smile. The competition begins. After the referee elder saw that both of them were ready, he immediately began the competition. Junior sister Bailey, sorry for the offense. LV Zhongyang first bowed to Bailey Hongzhuang. No matter what the final result of this competition was, he hoped that it would not cause a rift between them. When Bailey Hongzhuang saw that LV Zhengyang's attitude was extremely calm, she also bowed and said, "Senior brother, do your best." In the next moment, Lu Zhengyang's Green Realm Level 1 aura gushed out of his body like a bolt of lightning. After sensing LV Zhengyang's aura, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but sigh. Yi Qinyu's judgment was really accurate. Judging from LV Zhengyang's aura, he had just broken through to Green Realm Rank 1. "Master, leave this competition to me," Baisher said excitedly. His gaze was completely locked onto Lu Zhengyang. This was only the first round of the preliminaries. There was no need for its master to make a move. It would be able to deal with it on its own. As their master's contracted beasts, they were a part of their master's strength. Even on this stage, contracted beasts were allowed to fight. Before this, there were many battles where contracted beasts fought. Contracted beasts could increase a cultivator's strength. Moreover, they were completely trustworthy. Therefore, as long as a cultivator had the conditions to have a contracted beast, they would not be stingy with their wealth to exchange for a suitable contracted beast. In this competition between the 4 palaces, many disciples had their own contracted beasts. Moreover, they were very powerful. Chapter 2231. Bailey Hongzhuang was not in a hurry to let Baisher fight. However, after seeing how confident and eager Baisher was, she felt that it was a good choice to let Baisher fight. Baisher's current strength was no longer the same as before. Ever since it consumed a large number of blood-colored demon crystals in the desert world, its improvement could be said to be very shocking. Xiao He and Xiao Bai were envious after seeing Baisher's improvement speed. However, they could not increase their strength by consuming demon crystals and could only stare in envy. As the only beast king in the world, Baisher was born with talents and abilities that many other demonic beasts did not have. "Alright, then you will fight in this match." Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly. Usually, everyone didn't pay much attention to her 3 contracted beasts, but today, in front of everyone's eyes, she wanted to let these disciples know that her 3 contracted beasts weren't incompetent. In the next moment, Bailey Hongzhuang slowly took a few steps back under everyone's astonished gaze. Then Baisher directly stood in front of Bailey Hongzhuang and confronted LV Zhengyang. Seeing Baisher's actions, LV Zhengyang could not help but be stunned for a moment. He thought that Bailey Hongzhuang would very likely let her contracted beasts fight together. However, even if other disciples fought together with their contracted beasts, it would be a cultivator and a contracted beast working together. However, looking at Bailey Hongzhuang's situation, it seemed that she intended to let this contracted beast fight with him and did not intend to participate. Baisher's figure had grown a lot. Compared to when it first came to Tiangang sect with Bailey Hongzhuang, it was now majestic. In fact, when Bailey Hongzhuang appeared with Baisher today, many people had already begun to pay attention to Baisher. A contracted beast's ability could be roughly judged from its size and strength. Some of the disciples present who knew about contracted beasts began to size up Baisher. They had to admit that Baisher gave off a mighty feeling at a glance and was definitely not just for show. Baisher did not hesitate to attack LV Zhengyang as soon as it appeared. It wanted to finish this battle cleanly. Bang! White Lion pounced forward at lightning speed. White Lion was even taller than a cultivator and had an astonishing aura. LV Zhengyang did not dare to underestimate White Lion at all. This contract beast's level was not low at all. Its strength was probably not inferior to his. Limitless soft palm. Essence energy surged out of LV Zhengyang's palm, attacking the White Lion with a thunderous momentum. White Lion's reaction speed was extremely fast. He flipped in midair and dodged Lu Zhengyang's attack. At the same time, he attacked from another angle. The White Lion's speed was extremely shocking. LV Zhengyang did not dare to be negligent as he quickly dodged. The moment the White Lion approached, LV Zhengyang felt a huge force attacking him. If he was knocked down by the White Lion, his body would definitely be injured. Bang bang bang. LV Zhengyang constantly attacked White Lion while White Lion dodged and attacked. Ever since he had trained in the desert world for so long, White Lion, who was already good at speed, was now even faster. His dodging ability was also top-notch. In terms of combat experience, he definitely did not lose to any cultivator. In an instant, LV Zhongyang and White Lion rapidly moved around the stage. The scope of the battle shocked everyone. Bang! Chapter 2232. LV Zhongyang's body fell heavily to the ground. White Lion pounced on LV Zhongyang's body. Its huge mouth and sharp teeth were clearly visible. LV Zhongyang felt cold sweat on his forehead. However, in the next second, White Lion had already retreated a few steps. It clearly had no intention of hurting LV Zhongyang. LV Zhongyang hurriedly stood up and looked at White Lion with lingering fear. White Lion's combat power was truly terrifying. If he had not judged wrongly, White Lion's cultivation level was above his. His contracted beast's cultivation level was above his. Even among the contracted beasts in the entire Tiangang sect, there were not many who could compare to White Lion. Junior sister Bailey, I've lost. LV Zhongyang's attitude was calm as he bowed. From the moment he understood White Lion's abilities, he knew that he would lose this match without a doubt. This was because Bailey Hongzhuang had yet to make a move. Once Bailey Hongzhuang made a move, the result would be obvious. You let me win. Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. Bailey Hongzhuang wins. The referee elder immediately announced the result. The onlookers were all dumbfounded when they saw this scene. Bailey Hongzhuang's victory was just too easy. From the beginning to the end, Bailey Hongzhuang had not made a move at all. She had relied on her contracted beast to crush LV Zhongyang. I was wondering why Bailey Hongzhuang was able to participate in this battle of the four palaces. So she relied on her contracted beast. This contracted beast's abilities are truly domineering. LV Zhongyang's cultivation level has already reached Green Realm first level. Bailey Hongzhuang's contracted beast is even more powerful. If I had such a contracted beast, how domineering would that be? Everyone's envious eyes fell on Bailey Hongzhuang's body. Such a result was really unexpected. Brother Gong, is Hongzhuang's contracted beast the one I saw in the academy? Lu Qinyue's face was filled with astonishment. This gap was a bit too big. Gong Shaoqing nodded. It's the same one from back then. However, during this period of time, White Lion's transformation has become even more shocking. Even one of Boss' contracted beasts is so powerful. It's practically a one-sided beating. Yuan Zhixin couldn't help but sigh. When the Azure Dragon Hall Master Yin Kaiqing saw this result, his face instantly stiffened. He had never expected that Bailey Hongzhuang would have such a trump card. He had never discovered it before. Hall Master Qin, you must have known this long ago, which is why you've always been so confident, right? Yin Kaiqing probed. Qin Ai smiled faintly, revealing an unfathomable expression. Then he fell silent. However, Qin Ai's heart was filled with astonishment. He never thought that Bailey Hongzhuang's contracted beast would be so powerful. This was a huge surprise for him. Moreover, in this way, everyone would think that Bailey Hongzhuang wasn't strong and relied on her contracted beasts. It was a good way to hide Bailey Hongzhuang's strength. Perhaps Bailey Hongzhuang would be able to enter the finals? Thinking of this possibility, Qin Ai couldn't help but feel excited. If a new disciple entered the finals of the Battle of the Four Palaces, it would be the first in Tiangang sect's history. Bailey Hongzhuang slowly walked back to the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. Everyone's gaze was focused on White Lion, wanting to know what kind of beast it was. Chapter 2233. Even though everyone was extremely curious about White Lion's breed, no one was able to determine what kind of breed White Lion was. Most of the breeds of contract beasts were known to everyone, but it was their first time seeing White Lion's breed. The reason why no one was able to determine White Lion's breed was because Bailey Hongzhuang had covered up the king word on White Lion's forehead. Otherwise, they would definitely be able to determine the Beast King's identity. Back then, Bailey Hongzhuang had covered up the king word on White Lion's forehead when she had just found out about its identity. Now she was even more used to it. Otherwise, once everyone knew that White Lion was a beast king, it would definitely cause an even bigger commotion. Junior sister Bailey, congratulations. I didn't expect your contract beast to be so powerful. Yi Chenyu looked at White Lion in amazement. Before this, no one had expected White Lion to be so powerful. In this way, Bailey Hongzhuang's trump card was very shocking. Once Bailey Hongzhuang and White Lion's strength were combined, many disciples would not be a match for Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and said, "Senior brother Yi, you flatter me." Throughout the entire day, the competition continued without stopping. Every disciple who won had a face full of joy, while the disciples who lost were extremely sad. Once they lost, they would not have any more chances. In this process, the 40 rounds of competition finally ended before the sky turned dark. Xiaoyingzi announced the names of the disciples who had advanced to the second round of preliminaries. Tomorrow would be the stage for these 40 disciples. Bailey Hongzhuang could be said to be a spectator for the entire day. She only left with everyone after the competition ended. Bailey Hongzhuang, you're just relying on your contract beast. Although this contract beast's strength is not bad, it's impossible for you to reach the finals with just this contract beast. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang was on her way out, Tan Lihan passed by Bailey Hongzhuang and said some harsh words unhappily. Instead of worrying about whether I can persevere, you should worry about yourself. Bailey Hongzhuang sneered. Tan Lihan snorted coldly and left. Xia Jiqing and the others came to Bailey Hongzhuang's side. After seeing Tan Lihan leave angrily, everyone was confused. "Hongzhuang, what did that woman say?" Xia Jiqing frowned. Today they were all on the viewing platform and were quite a distance away from Bailey Hongzhuang, so they had no idea what had happened. Bailey Hongzhuang waved her hand. "It's nothing. Don't worry about it." Seeing Bailey Hongzhuang's attitude, Xia Jiqing and the others had already understood in their hearts. However, with the identity and ability of Bailey Hongzhuang, there was indeed nothing to worry about. "White Lion, I haven't seen you in a while. I didn't expect you to be so powerful." Xia Jiqing touched Baisher's head. Baisher was really majestic now, and his fighting strength was really terrifying. In comparison, there was a huge gap between her Xiaofeng and him. Baisher rubbed his head against Xia Jiqing. He was still very familiar with Xia Jiqing, who had watched him grow up. "Your wind spirit tiger's strength has also increased very quickly." Chapter 2234. The next day the sky was clear and the wind was cool. The martial arts field was bustling with activity early in the morning. Many disciples had started betting on who would win. The odds were adjusted according to the disciple's strength. If the disciple was strong, the odds would be low. If the disciple was weak, the odds would be much higher. However, for the strongest disciples of the 4 branch palaces, this bet was not set up. This was because there was no suspense in their victory. Unless 2 of the strongest disciples of the 2 branch palaces clashed, there would be a different bet. Bailey Hongzhuang had checked her odds before the competition. She did not expect her odds to be in the middle. It seemed that everyone was optimistic about Baisher's strength. Just like the first day, Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the number she had drawn. Number 3. "I didn't expect to appear so early this time." Bailey Hongzhuang sighed. This was good. After the competition ended, she could return to her sleeping quarters to rest. It seemed like only one day's time, but her strength would increase again. Yi Chenyu was still sitting beside Bailey Hongzhuang. After yesterday's competition, Bailey Hongzhuang already knew that Yi Chenyu was very strong. If she guessed correctly, Yi Chenyu would most likely enter the finals. "Junior sister Bailey, your opponent today is White Tiger Palace's Guoqian. Her strength belongs to the middle level of White Tiger Palace. Her cultivation is around the second level of Green Realm. She has more battle experience than LV Zhongyang. She is not easy to deal with," Yi Chenyu explained to Bailey Hongzhuang after seeing the number in Bailey Hongzhuang's hand. Compared to yesterday's preliminary round, it was harder to rely on luck in the second round. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. "Green Realm Level 2. This cultivation was already very strong. The further one cultivated, the greater the difference between each level. Thank you for the reminder, Senior Brother Yi. I will be careful. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. The third match, White Tiger Hall's Guoqiaoyan vs Vermilion Bird Hall's Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang quickly walked up to the high platform as soon as the referee finished speaking. At the same time, Guoqiaoyan was already standing in front of Bailey Hongzhuang. The two women standing opposite each other immediately attracted the interested gazes of many disciples. Among the disciples who were participating in the finals, there were very few female disciples. The collision between these two female disciples was even rarer. "Begin," said the judge without hesitation. Then he left the fighting ring. Guoqiaoyan stared at Bailey Hongzhuang. The elemental energy of a level 2 Green Realm warrior burst out in an instant, filling the entire sky with a sense of suppression. Guoqiaoyan is already at Green Realm level 2. Even if Bailey Hongzhuang's contracted beast comes out, I'm afraid it won't be easy to win. The martial skills mastered by cultivators are much stronger than those of monsters. Bailey Hongzhuang will definitely lose this match. I also bet that Bailey Hongzhuang will win. I didn't expect her opponent to be Guoqiaoyan. Some of the cultivators who had bet on Bailey Hongzhuang began to complain. This bet was all about cultivation resources. If they lost, it would not be an ordinary loss. In contrast, Xia Jiqing and the others who bet on Bailey Hongzhuang were not worried at all. Chapter 2235. The large fist enlarged in Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes. Bailey Hongzhuang was not flustered as she raised her right fist to meet the attack. When the crowd saw that Bailey Hongzhuang had not allowed Baisher to make a move and had instead met Guoqiaoyan's fist head-on, their eyes simultaneously filled with shock. Guoqiaoyan's power had always been on the list in the White Tiger Palace. Bailey Hongzhuang was only a pill master. Was she not asking for trouble by doing this? When Guoqiaoyan saw Bailey Hongzhuang's actions, a smile appeared in her eyes. She had thought that she would need to spend some time to deal with Bailey Hongzhuang's contracted beast. She never thought that Bailey Hongzhuang would have no intention of letting her contracted beast attack, and instead wanted to meet force with force. In this way, the competition would end very quickly. Bang! The two fists collided with a loud bang and energy ripples spread outwards. However, contrary to the crowd's expectations of Bailey Hongzhuang being defeated, Bailey Hongzhuang remained standing on the same spot. Her expression was calm and she did not look injured at all. Guoqiaoyan stared at Bailey Hongzhuang in shock. Based on the power that had been transmitted from her fist, Bailey Hongzhuang was not the least bit inferior to her. Could it be that Bailey Hongzhuang was also a powerful cultivator? When this thought appeared in Guoqiaoyan's mind, she felt that it was rather inconceivable. How could Bailey Hongzhuang's cultivation not be any weaker than hers? Even if Bailey Hongzhuang was not a pill master, she was still a new disciple. Bailey Hongzhuang did not give Guoqiaoyan the chance to think. She rose to her feet once again and her sharp fists exploded towards Guoqiaoyan like lightning. Bang bang bang. The two figures flew through the air and the wind from their fists was like thunder. In a short moment they had exchanged more than 10 blows. When the two separated once again, Guoqiaoyan's expression had turned extremely ugly. Her hands couldn't help but tremble. At this moment, she no longer doubted Bailey Hongzhuang's strength. This was because not only was Bailey Hongzhuang not weaker than her, she was even stronger. I didn't expect. I underestimated you. Guoqiaoyan stared at Bailey Hongzhuang. She had never treated Bailey Hongzhuang as her opponent. Now it seemed that she had underestimated her opponent. It's good that you don't underestimate him now. After Bailey Hongzhuang moved her muscles and bones, she felt a lot more comfortable. The demonic beasts in the desert world were all abnormally strong. In the process of cultivating in the desert world, her strength could be said to have increased rapidly. She had to fight with those monstrous demonic beasts almost every day. She hadn't fought for the past 2 days, so she wasn't used to it. The onlookers were completely dumbfounded when they saw that Bailey Hongzhuang's strength was actually on par with Guoqiaoyan's. Isn't Bailey Hongzhuang an alchemist? Why is she so strong as well? A new disciple who has already reached level 2 of the Green Realm. We can disembowel ourselves at any moment. It's a slap in the face. How would we have any dignity left? Since you're not weak, then I won't hold back. Guo Qiaoyan's voice was cold. Even though Bailey Hongzhuang's strength had exceeded her expectations, she still didn't think that Bailey Hongzhuang would be a match for her. Please. Bailey Hongzhuang's expression was calm. Even at this moment she still looked as calm as ever. Ding! Chapter 2236. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her hand, and the glass sword immediately appeared in her hand. Azure Spirit Sword Technique. Guo Qiaoyan shouted coldly. The essence energy in her body instantly surged into the sharp sword in her hand, and a resplendent light emerged from the sword. Mystic Glass Sword. Bailey Hongzhuang's movements were not slow at all. She flipped her hands and condensed a seal, while the glass sword stood upright in the air. At this moment, everyone only felt that the essence energy in the air was frantically rioting. Two terrifying auras swept out with the two as the center. In the air, two enormous swords quietly condensed, mixed with a frightening fluctuation. Bang! Monstrous elemental energy surged. Two sharp swords that were over 30 meters long tore through the sky with extreme violence. Then, under everyone's shocked gazes, they collided with a loud bang. At the moment of impact, a thunderous sound resounded through the sky, and an extremely violent energy swept out. Fortunately, the Tiangang sect's fighting stage had its own array. No matter how shocking the battle fluctuations on the fighting stage were, it would not affect the disciples in the spectator stands in the slightest. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Bailey Hongzhuang's figure rapidly retreated. With a wave of her sleeves, she removed all the energy in her body. Guo Qiaoyan similarly retreated to the other side of the fighting stage. Looking at the two attacks that constantly corroded each other in the air, her eyes were gloomy and complicated. Bailey Hongzhuang's strength exceeded her expectations. Looking at Bailey Hongzhuang's calm and composed appearance until now, she felt increasingly uneasy in her heart. Bang! Another earth-shattering bang sounded. The two attacks turned into smoke and dissipated into thin air. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the mystic glass sword's effect and could not help but sigh. The Tiangang sect's disciples were indeed very strong. She actually did not achieve much effect. Guo Qiaoyan's face had an additional trace of paleness. Unless one looked carefully, one would not notice it. As a long-established expert of the White Tiger Hall, she actually fell into a disadvantage in the hands of a new disciple today. This was something that Guo Qiaoyan felt was simply impossible. If they were defeated by Bailey Hongzhuang's hands, they would really lose face. I didn't expect Bailey Hongzhuang to be so capable. Maybe I won't lose the bet and will even make a fortune. Bailey Hongzhuang really hit her strength well. Yesterday, when I asked the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall's disciples, they said that Bailey Hongzhuang completely relied on the strength of her contracted beast. Now, it seems that they were just talking nonsense. I've also heard this from Vermilion Bird Palace Hall's Tan Lihan. Why is she spouting such nonsense? After a short collision, many disciples had already changed their direction. At the very least, the outcome of this competition was still uncertain. In the competition area, Tan Lihan's face had already turned purple. The strength that Bailey Hongzhuang had displayed today was truly a slap to her face. However, her heart was filled with disbelief. Normally, she had never heard of Bailey Hongzhuang's strength. Bailey Hongzhuang's ranking on the Pillar of Fame was also abnormally poor. She did not expect Bailey Hongzhuang's schemes to be so deep. She had purposely set up a trap to make people overlook her strength. With Bailey Hongzhuang's strength in addition to her contracted beast strength, her battle strength was really not weak. Why don't we end this quickly and decide the victor in one move? Guo Qiaoyan stared at Bailey Hongzhuang. At this moment, the pressure in her heart was incomparably great. If this continued, the only one who would be affected would be her. It looked like she had no choice but to use her trump card. Chapter 2237. In the next moment, Bailey Hongzhuang's hand seals swiftly flipped over. Vigorous yuan power whizzed out from her body, and a terrifying aura quietly appeared. Guo Qiaoyan had begun her actions almost at the same time as Bailey Hongzhuang. She knew very well that it would not be easy for her to enter the finals based on her abilities. However, she felt that she still had a good chance of entering the third round of the preliminary round. As long as she entered the third round, her abilities would be acknowledged by the palace master, and her future development would be smoother. After all, the top 20 in the entire Tiangang sect would be the top 5 in the branch palace. This had always been the goal that she had been striving for. When she saw that her opponent was Bailey Hongzhuang, she felt that her luck was very good, and she would definitely be able to enter the third round. However, the situation before her eyes was very different from what she had imagined. If she were to be defeated by Bailey Hongzhuang, it would be better for her to be defeated by an expert who had been famous for a long time. Now Guo Qiaoyan only felt that she had drawn the worst draw possible. Infernal Divine Palm! Guo Qiaoyan cried out loudly. The yuan power in her body whizzed wildly, and almost all of it surged into the martial skill. The crowd could only feel a wave of energy in mid-air. Soon after, a gigantic yuan power palm slowly appeared from the clouds. A terrifying and enormous energy spread out from the infernal divine palm, causing everyone's heart to palpitate and panic. After this martial skill appeared, Guo Qiaoyan's aura withered a little, and her face was also dyed with a touch of paleness. Looking at Guo Qiaoyan's performance, the crowd understood that this was Guo Qiaoyan's trump card. Once she had unleashed it, she would not be able to unleash any more powerful moves. Instantly, the crowd's eyes lit up. It seems that once this martial skill had clashed, the result of this round would be known. Sacred Green Flame Palm. Bailey Hongzhuang cried out coldly. Soon after, a gigantic palm flickering with green flames slowly appeared in mid-air. The two gigantic palms faced each other in mid-air from a distance. Both of them were filled with an extremely violent fluctuation, causing one to tremble with fear. If that's the case, then you'll definitely lose this competition. Guo Qiaoyan looked at the green palm in the air. Although the two palms looked similar, she could feel that her infernal divine palm was much stronger than Bailey Hongzhuang's azure flame sacred palm. Thinking of this, Guo Qiaoyan couldn't help but feel relaxed. As long as she could obtain victory, so what if she had to expend a little more effort? You've finished executing your martial skill, but mine hasn't. As Bailey Hongzhuang's voice fell, her hand seal quietly changed. In the next moment, under everyone's astonished gaze, the green palm in the air rapidly shrank. With Bailey Hongzhuang's current strength, using the azure flame sacred palm was no longer as difficult as before. Instead, it was a very smooth and simple matter. As the green palm shrank, its aura and flames rapidly increased. The aura it emitted was more than twice as strong as before. Guo Qiaoyan's pupils shrank as a thick sense of shock rose in her eyes. Bailey Hongzhuang's martial skill can actually change in this way. Most importantly, the outcome of this battle would be different. Let's end this competition. Chapter 2238. Boom! Infernal Divine Palm and Sacred Green Flame Palm collided with each other in front of everyone's shocked eyes. A thunderous sound from the ninth heaven reverberated, and it was so loud that even the deaf could hear it. An exceptionally terrifying yuan energy storm formed in the air. Two bursts of energy swept across wildly before exploding in mid-air. Boom, boom, boom. The sound of the explosion continued to reverberate, and the spectating disciples could not help but use their yuan energy to protect their ears. Otherwise, immersing themselves in such sounds might cause them to lose their sense of hearing. The array on the tournament stage had been activated immediately, forming a pale golden protective shield. The protective shield completely isolated the yuan energy ripples, preventing it from leaking out and affecting the spectating disciples. However, from the violent fluctuations of the protective shield, one could tell just how terrifying the energy on the tournament stage was. The spectating disciples were all dumbfounded. Even in all the matches that they had watched yesterday, there was nothing as exciting as this. My God, Guo Qiaoyan has already used her trump card. I wonder if Bailey Hongzhuang can withstand it? I feel that Bailey Hongzhuang's ability is stronger than Guo Qiaoyan's. Her contract beast has yet to make a move. If Bailey Hongzhuang allows her contract beast to make a move, Guo Qiaoyan will definitely lose. This Bailey Hongzhuang is really a genius. Not only is she a genius alchemist, she's also a genius cultivator. Her age is younger than Guo Qiaoyan by a few years. If she's the same age as Guo Qiaoyan, wouldn't she defeat Guo Qiaoyan in one move? At this moment, all the disciples' gazes towards Bailey Hongzhuang changed. This kind of Bailey Hongzhuang was already much stronger than the average disciple in Tiangang sect. Even Han Xiling could not be compared to Bailey Hongzhuang. You guys still say that Bailey Hongzhuang is not worthy of young sect master. I feel that Bailey Hongzhuang is an absolute goddess. In the entire Tiangang sect, aside from Bailey Hongzhuang, who else is worthy of young sect master? Ever since the alchemist competition, Bailey Hongzhuang has gained many supporters in Tiangang sect. Now, after witnessing her performance on the tournament stage, everyone was filled with anticipation. After witnessing Bailey Hongzhuang's display of power, the medicine sect's disciples finally understood why Bailey Hongzhuang had chosen to stay in the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. This was because her innate talent in cultivation was also extremely outstanding. Genius. At this moment, almost every disciple felt that Bailey Hongzhuang was a genius. Even if Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes she was still a genius, she was still a genius. As long as she was given a few more years, Bailey Hongzhuang's strength would definitely be amazing. Inside the protective barrier, energy ripples swept out crazily. Red and green energy intertwined continuously, making it impossible for the audience to see the situation on the stage. This energy ripple is so terrifying. I wonder if Hongzhuang will be injured? A touch of worry appeared in Xia Jiqing's eyes. They were standing outside the protective shield and naturally were not affected in the slightest. However, the energy within the protective shield was enough to seriously injure people. Don't worry. With Hongzhuang's strength, this is definitely not a problem. Dong Fengyu's face was filled with a confident and brilliant smile. With his understanding of Bailey Hongzhuang would be able to handle this match with ease. This is not Bailey Hongzhuang's full strength. She will definitely win this match. Chapter 2239. Gui Jianyuan stood beside Shen Xiuhan and fixed his gaze on the stage. He smiled faintly and said, "Junior brother Shen, what do you think of junior sister Bailey's strength?" He had already noticed the conflict between Shen Xiuhan and Bailey Hongzhuang. Towards Bailey Hongzhuang, he was not envious of Bailey Hongzhuang like the others. Instead, he felt that Bailey Hongzhuang was an elegant and talented woman. Not to mention the first time he had spoken to Bailey Hongzhuang had been modest and polite. Even with the young lord's judgment, Bailey Hongzhuang was definitely not a seductive person. When Bailey Hongzhuang had tested her strength on the ranking pillar for the first time, she had already surpassed all the new disciples. Even some of the older disciples had been surpassed by Bailey Hongzhuang. To be able to reach such a cultivation at such a young age, it was impossible that she had not worked hard. Hearing Gui Jianyuan's words, Shen Xiuhan's expression remained cold. It's just a small trick. With such strength it's easy to deal with. Haha. Gui Jianyuan chuckled. I feel that this is not all of junior sister Bailey's strength. When junior brother Shen was a new disciple, you also did not have the strength to participate in the competition of the four palaces. The moment he said that, Shen Xiuhan's expression turned ugly. Indeed, as Gui Jianyuan had said, when he first came to Tiangang sect, although the palace master and elders thought highly of him as a new disciple, there was still a big gap between his strength and the older disciples. However, in the second competition of the four palaces, he had already performed extremely well. However, on this point, he was indeed not as good as Bailey Hongzhuang. Even if he did not want to admit it, it was a fact that everyone knew. Senior brother Gui, what do you mean? Shen Xiuhan turned to look at Gui Jianyuan with a cold look in his eyes. Gui Jianyuan smiled faintly. Junior brother Shen, you think too much. I just wanted to say that Bailey Hongzhuang is also a genius. With that, Gue Jianyuan returned to his seat and didn't intend to say anything more. Shen Xiuhan's face turned cold. In the entire Vermilion Bird Palace Hall, he feared no one except Gue Jianyuan. As the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall's eldest senior brother, Gue Jianyuan's relationship with the disciples had always been very good. Furthermore, his reputation was very high. Not only that, Gue Jianyuan was also very strong and had a very good relationship with the elders and palace masters. This was something that even he couldn't compare to. Moreover, he felt that Gue Jianyuan might be hiding something. The strength he had displayed might not be his true strength. It was precisely because he always had a feeling of being unable to see through Gue Jianyuan that he had always been wary of him. Chapter 2240. Such a stark contrast gave everyone an indescribable shock. For a time, everyone looked at this scene and did not make a sound for a long time. Originally, everyone thought that Bailey Hongzhuang was not Guo Chaoyan's opponent at all, but now, Guo Chaoyan had become like this, while Bailey Hongzhuang was safe and sound. Didn't this mean that Bailey Hongzhuang's strength was much stronger than Guo Chaoyan's? This was a bit too incredible. Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. Bailey Hongzhuang wins. Under such circumstances, even the referee elder's reaction was sluggish for a moment, but he quickly reacted and announced the result of the competition. With the referee elder's voice falling, everyone recovered from the shock and looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with a sudden change in their eyes. Senior Guo, thank you for letting me win. Bailey Hongzhuang slowly bowed before walking down the stage. Guo Chaoyan's appearance was extremely embarrassing, and her expression was extremely complicated. However, the touch of unwillingness in the depths of her eyes had disappeared. In this competition, she accepted her loss wholeheartedly. Dongfang Yu, Xia Jiqing and the others' faces flashed with a happy smile. On one hand, they were happy for Bailey Hongzhuang's victory, and on the other hand, they could get a lot of cultivation resources from this bet. This feeling was like they had received inside information before the competition. They had earned too much. Di Beichen's face was filled with a faint smile. Although Bailey Hongzhuang's cultivation time was not as long as some disciples, her strength was already stronger than many of the disciples. He believed that with Hongzhuang's strength, it would not be a problem for her to enter the finals. It was just that the ranking in the finals could not be determined. After all, the strength of the top masters of the 4 major palaces was extremely powerful. After the end of the competition, Bailey Hongzhuang did not continue to watch the competition, but returned to her palace. She did not intend to spend the whole day here. Cultivating for one more day would increase her strength by a bit. What's more, her goal was never the competition between the 4 palaces, but the battle for the throne. Regarding Bailey Hongzhuang's departure, many disciples had noticed, but at this moment, everyone had already regarded Bailey Hongzhuang as a true master worthy of respect. After the second round of the preliminaries, there were only 20 disciples left out of the 40. These 20 disciples could be said to be the top strength of the 4 palaces. Bailey Hongzhuang cultivated in the desert world for 3 days, and then recovered her yuan qi in the cultivation room. When the sun rose, her essence, qi and spirit had returned to their peak. Wife, your performance yesterday was very wonderful. After seeing Bailey Hongzhuang stop cultivating, Di Beichen laughed. Today is the 3rd preliminary round. As long as you can pass today's round, you will be able to enter the finals. However, there is a high chance that you will encounter a strong opponent. The later the competition, the higher the probability of meeting a strong master. Once she met one of the 4 great masters, it would not be so easy to advance. He had confidence in Hongzhuang's strength, but the 4 great masters were also extremely powerful. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly. Different situations call for different measures. If we really meet them, then we can only fight. Seeing Bailey Hongzhuang so calm, Di Beichen smiled. My wife's luck has always been good. Even if we really meet, the outcome is still unknown. You're tuning in to the Li Mei Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.